Hello everyone and welcome back to the MoeGamer podcast for winter 2019, which is a lovely period of time for everyone in the world at the minute. So we're just going to do our best to kind of enjoy ourselves today. I've got a lot of games I want to talk about.
Yes.
A lot of things that I've been enjoying a great deal, which is welcome distraction from all the other unpleasant stuff that's going on in the world right now. So I'm sure Chris, my regular podcasting partner in crime, Chris Kasky of MrGilders.com, you feel the same way, right?
Yeah, this is a tough time of year for everybody. I think that feeling is pretty widespread across most people I talk to. There's a lot to celebrate, but the winter makes things tough, and connecting with people and reflecting on the last 11 months of how you wasted the last 11 months. So let's just talk about games.
Yeah, sounds good to me. So, it's been a while since we got together, so we got a fair chunk of news to get through first of all, so we'll do that first. Then, our second segment, we got some stuff to talk about, and I think this time around we've mostly got the same stuff to talk about, but they are both things that we are both very excited to talk about.
Yeah,
so,
we've actually been playing some of the same stuff for a change.
Yeah, so that should be good. And then our main topic for today is going to be on the subject of monster collecting RPGs and so on. So we'll talk more about that when we get to it. So let's begin with the news. I put my news page in the right position before I started recording and then went and scrolled it away to completely the wrong place now. So bear with me a moment while I just find what our first story was. Okay, I think it was Fuga Melodies of Steel, wasn't it?
Yes.
Okay, tell me about this, because I know you're excited about this.
Yeah, so Fuga Melodies of Steel is the latest game in the Little Tail Bronx series, which consists of Tail Concerto and Solata Robo. So this is CyberConnect 2's kind of baby. In a lot of ways, Little Tail Bronx is like CyberConnect 2 makes other games to fund working on Little Tail Bronx. Like it's like their heart. So the big news was that it's going to be getting a physical release in all regions now. They've confirmed.
That's awesome.
Which is super exciting because we almost didn't get Solata Robo either back on the 3DS. So this is now officially. I mean, they're celebrating the 20th anniversary of the series, but it's kind of silly because it's only 2 games. It's not like a massive, It's not like a massive series, but like the following for the series is tremendous, and very much going in the vein of one of the things we discussed in the previous episode, which was the concept of quote dark furry end quote. The whole point of Fuga Melodies of Steel is that you are the orphans surviving in a war, and you have gotten your hands on like a magic tank, and you just have this magic tank packed full of orphans, and and the only way to fire the tank's cannon is to sacrifice an orphan. Like so you have to make like a choice when you're in like these difficult situations of like, do I like fire the cannon and like get out of this situation with relative ease, but also have to kill one of my friends that I'm trying to protect in the process. And there's like, the moral, like, is the greater good more important than the individual kind of choices. But everyone has cute little puppy dog faces.
Oh, just to make you feel extra bad.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that sounds really cool. I think I mentioned in the previous episode that someone from the comments section on Digitizer's website just sent me a copy of Solata Robo for free the other week. So
was it because of Dark Furry? Because they wanted you to experience the magic additional Dark Furry?
No, it was just because he'd seen me commenting on Digitizer and he'd followed the link through to my site, and he thought, this looks like something you might be into. Also, I don't know the context, and I didn't ask, but he said he had, quote, a surplus of copies of Solata Robo.
Okay.
So he said, do you want one? And I said, yes, please. And I didn't ask any more questions. So it came through a couple of days later. So I've got a copy of that now, which is good because it's quite hard to find over here.
Oh, yeah. I'm very excited for you to dig into it. It's a really special game.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's cool. I mean, it's a series I've been sort of passively aware of for quite a long time, and I've at various points I've had friends and acquaintances who have had very positive things to say about Solata Robo specifically. So yeah, I'm excited to delve into it at some point. So it's now on my shelf along with a million other things vying for my attention. So
I could retire tomorrow.
Yeah, I wish I would. I wish I could. Yeah. Anyway, moving on. Snack World: The Dungeon Crawl, which is the upcoming title from Level 5. So yeah, I remembered this time. Is officially coming west on February the 14th of 2020. So that's cool.
Yeah.
And it's going to be known as Snack World: The Dungeon Crawl Gold, which I think I have a feeling we already knew, but yeah. So that's officially what it's going to be called in the West. But we've got a trailer out now, and yeah, just confirmation that it's coming over. So that's cool.
It was a nice little nail in the coffin, because I know every single time there was any kind of rumblings that this might happen, I was bringing it up on here. So now we finally have confirmation. We finally have a date, and I'm gonna buy this because I love Level 5.
Yeah, that's good. All right, continuing on, another sort of upcoming release confirmed. The Switch and PlayStation 4 versions of Ikaruga are getting physical releases from Nicalis. We don't know exactly when that's going to happen yet, but it is happening apparently. So it's available digitally now and has been for a while, but yeah, there are physical copies coming out for that. So if you've ever wanted to own a copy of Ikaruga physically and didn't want to pay through the nose for the GameCube version, then, well, here you go. Yeah, continuing on, we've got a new Neptunia game on the way, which was teased and subsequently revealed as, I have no idea how you pronounce this, but VVVtune or Triple VTune, or I don't know. So it's basically a new Neptunia game that looks at the idea of virtual idols and virtual YouTubers and that sort of thing. So in keeping with the rest of the Neptunia series to sort of parody things that are happening at the time that they get released. So, for example, Mega Dimension Neptunia was sort of poking fun at the changeover of console generations. Neptunia U sort of had a look at sort of like the role of journalism and Gamergate and that sort of thing. This is looking at the phenomenon of virtual idols and YouTubers. Yeah, and it looks cool. So there's a few trailers and screenshots around the place. It's going to feature songs and dances with the idols. Yeah, don't know a huge amount about how it's going to play yet, but it looks like we've got a mix of old and new characters in there. Yeah, looking forward to this. Time for a new Neptunia game, although there's still several I haven't caught up on yet.
Do we know if it's RPG or if it's going to be like something like Neptunia U, where it's just like a different type of game featuring the Neptunia stuff? Like, do we have any kind of...
I'm not sure offhand, because the stuff I noted down was all from when it was first announced. It's being regarded as a spin-off game, I think, but and people seem to be assuming that it's an action RPG, but I'm not sure we've actually really got any confirmation about that as yet. So
that'd be cool.
Yeah, so I mean the action RPG side of stuff has been developing quite nicely. So sort of over the course of Neptunia U, Blanc and Neptune vs Zombies, and Cyber Dimension Neptunia, they've really sort of started to get a good feel for what makes a good action RPG. Oh, here we are. There's a few more details on Twinfinite. So the game is an action RPG with fields and dungeons in which the player can control the four goddesses and the virtual idols together. There are dance elements. There's melee weapons like swords, and you can change the character you control in sort of mid-battle and stuff like that.
Sounds maybe like it might be like Four Goddesses Online.
Yeah, it sounds that way. With some sort of fleshing out the kind of the side mechanics. There's it sounds like there's sort of a parody of the Japanese video sharing site Nico Nico Duga in there as well, where the virtual idols and virtual YouTubers can post their videos and interact with the fans, and each video you post lets you get items and stuff. So yeah, it looks like a cool idea. So details of that are sort of slowly creeping out a bit at a time. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. Mm-hmm. All right, continuing on. Yeah, we were just talking about this before we started recording today. Romancing Saga 3's physical version for nearly said Steam then. Switch is coming to Asia in 2020. So, have PlayAsia got this up for pre-order now? I think they have.
Oh, yeah. They? Yep, very much so. So this is just a great opportunity to be able to play this in English and own it. You know, obviously you can download it now; it's readily available. But if you would like to own it physically with the English language, Asia's got you covered again. This is a pretty momentous game. You know, this Romancing Saga 3 was very during the Super Famicom era, very influential. So, if you're a type of person like me who doesn't just collect games to play them, but also likes to own games that have specific there's specific milestones in terms of like genre development and history. The Super Famicom Romancing Saga games are particularly important.
Yeah, definitely. Saga seems to be sort of developing quite a presence at the minute, because we've got this, and there was what's that new one that just released? Scarlet Frontier.
Yeah,
just came out as well.
Boy, do I need to see the exact same news we're talking about for 3 with that. Like, God, that game is beautiful.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I've seen a few people playing it and being quite excited about it, and also baffled by the obligatory, completely obtuse Saga systems.
Yes.
But, it is tradition for the series at this point.
I love it. I love it so much.
Yeah, so I'd like to grab that. So I'm sure I'll have something to say about that at some point. Saga series in general is not one I know very well. My only real experience with it is Final Fantasy Legend 2 on Game Boy.
Okay, yeah.
And I played a bit of Saga Frontier 2 on PS1 when it first came out. But it was one of those games that at the time I played it, I don't think I was really sort of old enough to appreciate it, and I was still quite early in understanding how RPGs work, so I kind of bounced off it a bit then.
Same.
But it's one that I want to return to, just like Unlimited Saga. I know we've talked about a few times as well. That's another one that I'm going to try and make some time to actually cover that in detail this year, because I keep looking at it on my shelf and keep thinking I really want to play that and I really want to write about it, and I just haven't yet. Well, so I'm going to make time to do that this coming year.
Since we started doing this podcast, one of our running things in our side discussions and planning have always been that understanding that one day we will do a Saga episode, that we will both dig into Saga together, because my experiences are exactly the same as yours. I respect it. I understand its importance in terms of the history of the genre, but when Saga Frontier 1 and 2 were in their prime on the PS1, I didn't understand what I was experiencing at all. Yeah. And the only real frame of reference I had for RPGs was RPGs of relatively simplistic mechanics, stuff like Breath of Fire and Final Fantasy. So I wasn't prepared in any way for what Saga tries to level at you. So over the past couple years, I've been slowly amassing Saga games. I have the remake of the first Romancing Saga for the PS2.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And I grabbed a really nice copy of Unlimited. Last time I was at the Too Many Games convention in 2019, the summer, I grabbed a really beautiful copy of Frontier 2. So I'm just looking for a decent copy of Frontier 1 now to kind of fill that out. But I'm owning every Saga game that's had an English translation officially. Yeah, part of my collecting goals right now.
Oh, that's a good plan. Yeah, Saga Frontier 1 never came out over here because that was released sort of in that era where Squaresoft, as they were then, didn't bring half of their stuff over to Europe for some reason. So we missed out on that one. But Saga Frontier 2 came out when they sort of realised, hang on, we've got a market in Europe as well. So, yeah. I mean, I've got the means of playing an American copy of the first one. It's just a case of tracking it down, I guess, or taking a slightly grayer morality route. But, we're not too opposed to that here. Anyway.
Not if it's out of print.
Exactly. All right, continuing on. We've got some Darius news. So there is the Darius Cozmic Collection is in development for PS4, already out on Switch. And the Switch version is getting some stuff added to it, which is Darius Plus and Supernova and SaGa, which is cool. So, the PlayStation 4 version is looking like it's going to be digital only, and will have trophy support. whereas the Switch version had a physical release, didn't it? Was that a really weird physical release where there were like two releases and none of them had all of it in it?
Yeah, there's two different versions of the Darius collection. One which is focused on the home releases of Darius games, and one which is focused on the arcade releases of Darius games.
Right, gotcha.
So, why it's not just one collection is beyond me. It's part of the reason I don't own it, because I kind of found the release model very exploitative.
Yeah.
But I did want to mention this just because it's Darius and we like our shmups, so.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so watch out for that. At the same event, I think M2 announced that they're going to bring, quote, nearly all of Toaplan's games to modern home consoles.
Yeah.
You know more about Toaplan than me, so what stuff would people know from Toaplan?
I think the big thing about Toaplan is Truxton, which
yes, of course.
People are very fond of Truxton. But it's, once again, I'll use the word history like 100 times this morning, which is like from a historical perspective, Toaplan's really important because Toaplan is kind of the cooker from which Rising and Aiding emerged.
Yeah.
And like, don't even get me started on Rising and Aiding's games. They're simply the best. So this is just a really cool exploration. Snow Brothers is a game I think a lot of people are familiar with. Twin Cobra. So there's a couple of classic Toaplan games that a lot of people are familiar with.
Yeah. That's cool. And they've said it's not just going to be the shoot 'em ups they're releasing as well, so they're going to try and release all of them except the more sort of risque ones. So Mayong Sisters and Enmadio are two that they said they're not going to do. But they are going to bring stuff like Wardener and Guardian and Snow Brothers, as you say, as well as all the shoot 'em ups and stuff. So that's cool. Always good to see stuff getting resurrected for modern systems. Speaking of which, slightly more recent history, I guess, but still cool. Bayonetta and Vanquish are getting a 10th anniversary bundle coming very soon. So what platforms has this been confirmed for? Because it was initially only announced... It's for everything, is it? Yeah, because it was initially PS4 only announced for Xbox, wasn't it?
Yeah, so...
Yeah.
After the initial announcement, it was then confirmed for everything, and most importantly, it was confirmed for everything with a physical release with a beautiful steel case.
Excellent.
So...
Yeah,
that's... Come to Papa. I can't wait to play Vanquish in 4K in like full like locked frame rate. Like I often describe Vanquish to people as the third-person shooter from which after you have played it you will never want to play another third-person shooter. It just shits on the entire genre and makes everything else like not fun.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very good. It's definitely very cool, and I think a few other sort of Japanese attempts at third-person shooters have taken some inspiration for it at various times. Like I know definitely there's elements. Bullet Girls Phantasia is a much slower-paced game than Vanquish was, but it's got certain elements of like the movement in Vanquish are incorporated in there, like the sort of leaping around and sliding while shooting and locking onto enemies and stuff. That's in Bullet Girls Phantasia, and that's really satisfying there. So. That's cool. Yeah, so Vanquish, a game I played back in the day, but never actually got around to finishing it. So it'll be good to sort of revisit that. And I absolutely loved Bayonetta, though. So another opportunity to play and enjoy that. Very welcome indeed.
It's like, I don't even feel like Bayonetta's worth talking about. it's like evidence of it. Like Bayonetta at this point is like a religious text. So,
yeah,
like I don't need to sing the praises of Bayonetta or convince.
Bayonetta is the game that made me understand that type of game, because sort of previously I tried the first Devil May Cry and I didn't really get on with it when I first tried, but I'd heard so many good things about the original 360 version of Bayonetta when it came out. I thought, I'll give it a try, and I got it. It just clicked. Just the mechanics and the controls and everything just absolutely clicked to me, and I understand that game now, that type of game now, and it's pretty much entirely thanks to Bayonetta.
Life is good. Life is good with 3D character action games.
Yes, indeed.
Part of me wants to bemoan the fact that it's not a more prolific genre, but the other part of me just loves the fact that like when they do come out, they're just such solid.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Solid.
I was going to say what we do get is really good, so that's great.
I'm still waiting for them to finish with all the DLC for Devil May Cry 5 and announce a complete version for me, because I really want to get my hands on that. Yeah,
definitely. All right, next up we have some unusual retro gaming news. So, a Japanese retro PC and video game store called Beep, they stepped into video game publishing earlier this year with an announcement of Cotton Reboot. They've recently announced that they are bringing a fantasy-themed shoot-'em-up called Undead to MSX2. That's not a port to modern consoles. They're bringing the MSX2 version back.
That's awesome.
So they are doing a limited-run physical copy reproduction of this game. So anyone who has an MSX2 or the facility to play MSX2 games, they can play it on their original hardware. This is so cool. There's so so many old games that are so hard to get hold of now. And so the idea of having reprints like this, I guess it's essentially a sort of similar idea to sort of old books getting a reprint, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's really cool. I mean, I don't know a lot about Undead, but yeah, it's cool to see just this even happening at all. So
Undeadline's cool. So I've played the Japanese Mega Drive version of Undeadline.
Okay, yeah. So it did get some ports. Yeah.
It's basically like it's a member of a subgenre of shmups that I really appreciate, which is the subgenre where you're a dude walking, instead of a ship. And it's horror themed. So like there's like just like it's like monsters and the backgrounds are like spooky.
That's cool.
I like it a lot. It's part of the reason I wanted to post this, because I just think it's a neat game worth talking about, and if it gets people to look it up on YouTube and check it out and be more aware of it, it's just a really neat game.
Yeah, cool. All right, continuing on, we've had confirmation that the video game adaptation of Is It Wrong to Try to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon Infinite Combat is coming west in 2020 for PS4, Switch, and PC. So this is one that we weren't sure if it was going to come over here or not for a while, but it's a really popular anime over here, so I'm not surprised to see this. As far as I can make out, this is a sort of top-down, vaguely sort of, I don't know if it actually is a roguelike, but it's sort of presented like a mystery dungeon game with sort of chibi characters and polygonal but tile-based maps that you explore, and then sort of interactions between all the characters, so you can chat up Hestia and admire her formidable bust line and that sort of thing.
I wasn't really interested in this game, and then I watched the footage. And you know what it reminds me of? Racketeer.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I can absolutely see that.
So then I got excited.
Yeah, so like I say, it's cool to see this, because there's a lot of anime adaptation games that don't make it over here for various reasons. But Is It Wrong to Try to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon, or Danmachi as most people call it, because the English name is stupid. That's been a really popular series over here. So, yeah, having a video game adaptation to be able to enjoy is very welcome. Very welcome indeed.
So help me, this better be a gateway to me getting the Konosuba game. I need it in my life.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've read a few bits and pieces about that, and it just sounds like they've deliberately made it quite frustrating to play.
Which is proper. That's how it should be.
Yeah, exactly. So like Megami in the game, she literally does only have one spell, and it does use all her magic points and that sort of thing. And it sounds like they've done it properly. So it sounds like it might be a nightmare to play, but entirely appropriate for an adaptation of Konosuba.
Oh, I want it.
Yeah,
I love Konosuba so much.
Yeah. Okay, moving on. We finally had some updates on the NES and Super NES apps for Nintendo Switch. So it's been quite a while since we had anything new on here, but we've had Nintendo announced a while back that they were going to go to an irregular update schedule, which some people not unreasonably, to assume that they were just weren't going to bother anymore. But yeah, so in the last week we've had a few additions to both of them. So the NES version has had Crystallis and Journey to Silius, and the SNES app has now got Breath of Fire 2, Kirby Superstar, Star Fox 2, and Super Punch-Out. So basically, there's now not really a reason to own a SNES Classic if you have a Nintendo Switch Online subscription, because Star Fox 2 is there.
Precisely. I'm very, very excited to finally give Star Fox 2 a try. But also, this is just tremendous because Kirby Superstar and Breath of Fire 2 are like two of the best games on the Super Nintendo, like, period. Like, if you asked me to like make like a list of like top 10 SNES games, like Kirby Superstar would be on there easily. Mm-hmm. And Breath of Fire 2 is inching on Chrono Trigger in terms of like best quality RPG on the system. And I'm not just saying it because there's a cute cat girl. It's genuinely an amazing game.
Yeah, and the NES games are cool as well. Journeys to Silius is quite a fun sort of I guess you call it a Mega Man like in some ways.
Yeah,
that's the one that was originally supposed to be a Terminator game, wasn't it, if I remember correctly?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know the story of that one.
Yeah, I watched a playthrough of it a little while back on, I think it was Game Grumps, and they were talking a bit about the history of it. And yeah, I think it was originally intended to be a Terminator game, so you can sort of see little hints of that here and there in things like the enemy and the background design and so on. But they had to sort of reskin it to be original. And then Crystallis is also on the SNK 40th Anniversary Collection as well. But for those who don't own that, you can now play it on the NES app as well. So that's cool.
That's also a fantastic game.
Yeah. And yeah, Star Fox 2 is a lot of fun. So it's one of those games that's sort of really kind of pushing the SNES a little bit further than it should really go. But in terms of game design and structure and stuff, it's really interesting to consider when this was originally designed and compare it to modern games, because it's basically taking ideas from sort of modern, what we think of as modern procedurally generated games, and applying them to something that was developed back in the Super NES era. So yeah, it's a fascinating game, that one. It's well worth playing. Okay, moving on. Mikage is working on an original project for PS5, PS4, Switch, PC, and it's specifically geared towards overseas fans, and they're working with Axis Games on that. Not a lot of details about this at the minute.
I just wanted to point it out because this is essentially the progeny of Image Epoch.
Oh yes, of course.
So this is the Mikage is the Image Epoch guy. So hopefully whatever they make has a little bit of that old DNA in it. I don't know.
Yeah. So it looks like they're working on a VR version as well. Of whatever this is. And back in September there was a teaser that they're working on a original strategy RPG as well, so I'm not sure if this is the same thing or if this is something completely different. But yeah, this isn't set to release until 2021, so we're probably not going to hear much more about this in the immediate future, but it has been revealed that they're working on it, so that's nice. Continuing on, Kingdom Hearts 3 has had some DLC announced, and for those who have been sort of bemoaning the lack of Final Fantasy characters in Kingdom Hearts 3, well, here they all are. So the original Kingdom Hearts 3 only had sort of statues of Auron and Cloud in there. So the DLC has Aerith, Squall, and Yuffie in there. So there's a picture of Sid as well. So presumably he plays a role at some point as well. So yeah,
neat.
So this is looking like it's going to be a fairly substantial DLC pack. So haven't played Kingdom Hearts 3 yet, but the people I talk to who have played Kingdom Hearts 3 and are sort of up to date on the series and so on, they're very excited about this because it's looking like a really cool continuation of the series.
That's exciting. Can't wait for a complete edition.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, carrying on. Trails of Cold Steel 3 has been announced for Switch. So that's just come out for PS4. And over here, rather. It's been out in Japan for a while, but they've announced it for Switch. Japan's going to get this on March the 19th of 2020, and NISA have already announced that they're working on a Western port of it as well. You can pre-order that now. So, what people are hoping for in the long term of this is having all of Trails on one platform. That would be amazing. Whether or not that will happen, I don't know, but... given the number of sort of Vita ports we've had to Switch previously, it's not unreasonable to think that sometime we might see Trails in the Sky ported. And if Trails of Cold Steel 3 does well on Switch, I mean, there's no reason why they can't port the first two as well. So it'd be wonderful to have this whole series on one platform. Because at the moment, it's scattered across several different ones, with several of the games that still haven't been localized as well. So... if we can get the whole thing in one place, that would be amazing.
I've already dedicated myself to collecting Cold Steel on the PS4 because I have 1, 2, and 3 now. But I don't know. Just throwing this out there, video game gods. Trails in the Sky triple pack.
Yes. Yes, please.
1 carts. All 3 Trails in the Sky games.
Yeah.
Please. And thank you. You can charge me $100 for it, just like Koei Tecmo is for that Atelier collection. Like I don't care. Just give me all 3 on a cart that I can play on my television.
All right, moving on. Just a smaller scale bit of news here. I just thought this looked quite interesting. This is a little indie game has released called SuperMash, which basically allows you to mash together 2 game genres, and then it will sort of generate a game for you based on that. So you sort of say, right, I want stealth and platformer mashed together, and it will generate a stealth platformer for you. This I don't know if this is any good or not, but it's just released recently and it caught my attention. So you might want to check it out. It's available now for PC via the Epic Game Store. Boo, hiss, whatever. Blah, 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 blah. And it's coming to PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and Switch in 2020. So watch out for that. There's a trailer up for that now. So have a look at that. Moving on, Babylon's Fall, which is the new title from Square Enix and Platinum Games. We had some more gameplay revealed for that in Sony's State of Play event, which they held recently. This is looking very nice, isn't it?
Yeah. How did I describe it to you? Dark Souls, but fun. It just looks like they're kind of taking a page from From Software's lived in decrepit medieval world kind of aesthetic, but making a Platinum game in that setting. So
I'm all for that.
Yeah, okay. Because I love Dark Souls, but I love Dark Souls environments, but sometimes I just want to rip my way through Dark Souls. So this is power fantasy in a Dark Souls looking setting. So okay, I want this game now, please.
Yeah, I'm definitely all for that. All right, moving on. Resident Evil 3 is getting a remake, to no one's surprise, after how well Resident Evil 2 remake did. So that is coming in April of 2020, and it's including the online mode Resident Evil Resistance as well. So this is looking very nice. Resident Evil 2 remake, I didn't play that, but people said it was very true to the original. So this is sort of Capcom continuing on their redemption arc, basically, isn't it?
It's a good arc. Stay on it, folks.
Yeah, definitely. Moving on, we had an announcement that a game called Sisters Royale is going to be released worldwide on January the 30th of 2020 for Nintendo Switch and PlayStation 4. This is a spiritual successor to Castle of Shikigami. And it's a vertically scrolling shoot 'em up with 5 different characters with their own special abilities. A sort of proximity-based scoring system, so you have to get close to enemies to score more points to them. So sort of encouraging risky play and so on. And this just looks like a lot of fun. So
I love Castle of Shikigami.
Yeah. So pre-orders are opening for this sort of this coming week at the time of recording, I think. If you want to pre-order it. And the original Castle of Shikigami you can get for PC on Steam as well if you want to revisit that.
Oh, that's exciting. That's a great series.
Yeah. That was on. Was that on PS2 as well? I want to say. Is that right?
Yeah, Castle of Shikigami 2 was on PS2.
Yeah.
Castle of Shikigami 3 was available on the Wii with a legendarily bad translation. But it's a shmup, so whatever. It's still played incredible.
Yeah.
But like Castle of Shikigami as a series is great because it's one of the. It's like talking about subgenres again. It's a subgenre of vertical shmups where like you're a person instead of a ship, kind of like that aesthetic. Yeah. You're like flying, and one of the hallmarks of the series, at least for me, has always just been like a very large selection of characters, very varied shot patterns. That totally, like, each character fundamentally changes the way you approach and play the game. So there's just a lot of room for, like, experimentation there. So hopefully this Sisters Royale kind of continues that tradition, because I do have very fond memories of that system. I mean, that series.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting this. I think I got a press release for this the other day and requested a review code, so I should hopefully have a chance to play that.
That'd be great
when they get review copies out for that. So that's cool. Continuing on, this 2K has announced that they have a new studio called Cloud Chamber with offices in San Francisco, California, and Montreal, and they're making a new Bioshock game. Bioshock's not a series I love, but people had sort of started to assume that it was over and done with. So this is sort of significant that they're bringing it back. Not a lot known about it other than the fact that it'll be a first-person shooter still, and there's some decent talent behind it in this Cloud Chamber studio from the side of things. So yeah,
I just posted this as a shout out to my buddy Matt, because 3 weeks ago we were getting drinks together and he loves Bioshock, and he was bemoaning how how long it's been since Infinite, and I was just like, face it, dude, you're never gonna get another Bioshock.
Yeah. You should play System Shock though. I've seen some screenshots and footage of the remake of that.
Oh yeah,
and that's looking fantastic. So yeah, be sure to play that if you've never played System Shock before and you can't stomach the atrocious controls of the original PC version. Yeah. Okay, continuing on. I Am 8-Bit is doing a physical PlayStation 4 release of Wattam, which is Keita Takahashi's new weird game.
Yeah. Oh, so weird.
Yeah. So this is looking bizarre. This is the one about giving presents to people, isn't it? Is that right?
It really. I've watched some gameplay footage of it, and it really just appears to be like a continuation of like the philosophy of Nabi Nabi Boy. Yeah. Just like creating a playground for you to do dumb shit in. But it looks like the focus of the game is like building stacks. Like getting characters to like all stand on each other's heads and like build really high like stacks of friends, and then you like give a present at the top of the stack, but the present is a bomb that blows the entire stack up. so like you have to, it's like all the joy of like when you're a kid like building a block tower and then knocking it over. I guess you're just like building these like precarious like totem poles and then just destroying them. So yeah, we'll see. All I know is they should like. It's like classic bizarre like Keita Takahashi like humor, but like the disc just has a picture of like the mayor of the town just like crying, and it's just like there's just like a speech bubble that says like, "Why am I alone?" Probably because you encourage people to stand on each other's heads and then detonate explosives on top of them. But we'll see. Yeah. We'll see where this goes. Yeah. All I know is I ordered my copy. I chose the Apple cover. There's 3 cover variations, and you can choose which one you get.
Yeah, so there's there's the Apple, like you say. There's a piece of sushi, which is beautifully photographed, I must say.
Yeah.
And there's a quote sun, which appears to be a fried egg. Yeah, so that's available for pre-order on iam8bit.com now. So you can choose one of those cover variants. It comes with an instruction manual as well, which is worth noting. I've actually bought quite a few games that had instruction manuals recently. I've been very pleasantly surprised by that.
Well, a lot of these limited press houses are pretty obsessed with providing like an old school experience with instruction manual.
Yeah, definitely. And the instruction manual for this is apparently written and illustrated by Keita Takahashi himself. So, that should be suitably.
Yeah, yeah. I'm very excited. Very excited to enjoy what madness lies within.
Yeah. All right. Moving on. In the last couple of days, we had some announcement that a game called Hero Must Die Again is being re-released and getting an English version. So this was previously a PlayStation Vita remake of a mobile phone RPG. It's by Nipponichi, and Dejiga Games has recently announced that it's going to have a PC release via Steam with English subtitles in spring of 2020. So the concept behind this is that you take on the role of a hero who sort of sacrificed himself to defeat an evil demon lord. But before he dies, an angel gives him 5 days to sort his shit out, basically. And it turns out that sort of just defeating the demon lord hasn't sort of fixed the world, as it were. So in his 5 days, he's got a whole bunch of stuff that you can do and try and sort out along the way. And then there's apparently sort of 50 different endings to achieve, depending on what actions you choose to take and so on. So, yeah, there's a lot of people who've sort of been following Vita import games. So a shout out to a blogger that I follow who does some really good Vita coverage, Kresnik58. He's previously written about the import version of this and been begging for a localization for ages. So the fact this is finally coming west is really cool. And
I never heard about this one.
Really fascinating concept. So I'm looking forward to giving this a try. Okay. What else have we got? Bravely Default 2.
Yes!
Bravely Default 2, the third game in the Bravely series. Because Japan.
I mean, technically the fourth, if you want to count 4 Heroes of Light.
Oh, yeah, I suppose. Yeah. But anyway, this is heading to Nintendo Switch. This was announced at the Game Awards 2019. And it's got music by the guy who did the soundtrack for the original Bravely Default as well, which people are very happy about. So it will be lovely to have a soundtrack by Revo that isn't butchered by the 3DS's atrocious sound output. So we'll actually be able to put it through a lovely big sound system, listen to it on headphones without having to turn the volume up full, and still strain my ears to hear it. Wonderful.
I've watched this Nothing trailer like 10 times in the past 24 hours. Just solid goosebumps every time. The music and the art and just I won't go off on a Bravely Default tangent, but I really do believe it's one of the best RPGs in the past decade. Possibly the best. Like I in terms of maturity and narrative and mechanics and the synergy of mechanics with narrative, I consider the original Bravely Default like top tier RPG, like on the same level as Final Fantasy 12.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for all the people who have been bemoaning the fact that modern RPGs they're not like old Final Fantasy, these are old Final Fantasy games. So, you know, if you haven't played these and you've been complaining about that, then sort that out. So, I mean, even conceptually, this is classic Final Fantasy. So, the teaser website confirms that there will be a new band of heroes known as the Heroes of Light who will travel the world looking for the 4 crystals, which is, you know, the plot for the first 5 Final Fantasy games at the very least. But yeah, and Bravely Default indeed. But the wonderful thing about Bravely Default and indeed the later Final Fantasy games is all the stuff that they weaved around that basic concept and how they made each game unique around that basic structure. So excellent stuff. So looking forward to that.
Did you play Bravely Second? I didn't play Bravely Second, which I feel like makes me a bad Bravely fan. But I never heard anything good about it, so I never really felt like I missed anything.
I don't think it was bad as such, but I think some people were a bit pissed off that Revo didn't do the soundtrack. That's
fair. I too was sad when I originally heard that. I just remember people like saying that it felt more like a spin-off or an also ran than like it didn't have like the brilliance of the original Bravely Default, neither mechanically nor narratively.
Yeah.
But this is all just like this is what I've heard. Like I don't know. Yeah. I have never taken the time to play it.
Yeah. Yeah. What I'm keeping my fingers crossed for is a Switch re-release of the first two. That would be lovely.
Oh, God. Yeah, I would...
Yeah.
Part of the reason I never played the second one was just I'm tired of being tethered to handhelds. I don't play handhelds very often anymore, so I just never got around to it. But yeah, oh God, if I could play either the first two on my television, yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, moving on. We have had an announcement that there's a new Dungeons & Dragons Dark Alliance game coming out. Now, this was announced with possibly the worst trailer I've ever seen in my life. I don't know if you've watched this trailer.
No. What makes it
fucking atrocious?
What makes it so? Is it as bad as one of those like terrible Japanese trailers where it's literally just text flashing across the screen for 3 minutes?
No, it's just the design of the trailer. Like, what they've done is they've...
what the hell is this?
Are you watching it now?
I am.
Yeah. No, what they've done is they've... You know, like, those really annoying, smug GoPro videos that people do of, like, their extreme sports and that sort of thing. What they've done is they've done that, but for Dungeons & Dragons, and it's just awful.
What is this, it's like, bad grindcore music? Like, what are they fucking doing?
Yeah.
This makes me not want to play a medieval fantasy game for the rest of my life.
But yeah, it is oh, excuse me, it's making me have plague. It's a terrible trailer, but the reason I bring this up is the Dark Alliance games are fantastic console action RPGs.
They are.
And as long as this trailer isn't indicative of what we can expect from the game, we should be in for a good time. So basically, if you're not familiar, the two previous Dark Alliance games, or Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance as they were previously known, they were sort of Diablo-style action RPG before Diablo on console really became a thing. We'd had a PS1 version of the original Diablo before, but Dark Alliance for PS2 and Xbox. So these were the games that really sort of nailed the feel of a console action RPG.
Yeah,
they were really good. They had really satisfying weighty combat. They had sort of nice integration of they had some light platforming mechanics, but they weren't sort of over the top or anything like that. 3 different character classes, simultaneous local co-op, and they rather sensibly made it not too long as well. It was only about 10 hours long as well, so if you wanted to play it through with a friend, that was a perfectly plausible thing that you could do over the course of a couple of sessions. I actually played both of the Dark Alliance games in local multiplayer with a friend when they first came out. It was just such a great experience. So as long as they sort of nail the feel of those old games, I'm on board with this, despite that trailer. But so this is, again, it sounds like it's been designed for co-op play, either locally or online, which is good to hear. But no real sort of gameplay footage as yet, so we'll have to wait and see exactly how they're going to implement this. Alright, continuing on, some news that sort of appeared today at the time of recording. Dispatch Games has announced that they are releasing Japanese rail sim Journey to Kyoto for Nintendo Switch.
It's awesome!
Which I'm actually kind of excited about. Because this just looks like a wonderfully chilled out game. It's a game where you drive a train up and down a couple of different rail lines. And it's all done with live action video rather than rendered graphics.
Ah.
So it's all sort of like real life scenery at different times of day and going in different directions up the track. And it just looks like a wonderful sort of game to sit back and relax with and sort of see some nice scenery and that kind of thing. So, yeah, that's available for pre-order from Dispatch Games now. And that's expected to come out in April of 2020.
Right,
so
this announcement is great. Do you love Densha? Yes! Yes. I really like Dispatch. They do some really neat stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
I still bring my copy of Penguin Wars to parties where I know there will be a Switch, like, all the time.
Yeah. Oh, you can actually still get that through them. I thought that had been sold out everywhere, but yeah, they've actually still got some copies of that available. So, might have to grab that, because I meant to pick that up when it first came out and never got around to it for one reason or another, but it's still available through Dispatch Games for $24.99 in the minute, so you can get that for a decent price if you haven't already. All right, last bit of news I just wanted to mention today is that Bullet Girls Phantasia, which I mentioned earlier and which I've recently done some in-depth coverage of on MoeGamer, that is coming to Steam in early 2020. So the Steam page for that is already up, so you can add it to your wish list and stuff now. You can read my coverage of it on moegame.net if you want to find out a bit more. This was a really fun game. It combines a third-person shooter with some light RPG progression, with some of the filthiest non-pornographic scenes you'll ever see. So it's fantastic, absolutely fantastic. This is a fun game, and I'm really happy to see it getting a broader release, because previously the PS4 version only got an Asia English release, so it's had a fairly limited audience up until now. So with it coming to Steam, a lot more people will have the opportunity to spend some time with it and enjoy it. So it is a genuinely good game. I mean, it is super sexy as well, but it is also a genuinely good game. So watch out for that. All right, I think we're done, unless you've got anything else you want to mention.
No, I think that's it. At first I thought I was scraping, but that was, as usual, a lot of cool news. So
yeah, I was going to say, I've just looked up and it's like 50 minutes of news. Okay, yeah. I think we're all caught up on all the stuff that's caught our attention for now, though. So let's take a short break, and we'll come back, and we'll probably talk for an hour about what we've been playing recently. So, see you in a moment.
あなたのハート、撃ち抜くね、パキューン!
Welcome back. For our second segment, we're going to be talking about what we've been playing recently. Now, I know there's two games that we've both been playing recently, but before we jump into those, has there been anything else you want to bring up first?
Not with any amount of serious dedication. No. No, I mean, right. I've been dabbling with some stuff, but not to the extent to which I've played the other two games we're going to be talking about.
Okay, then. All right. Where do you want to begin, then?
Let's talk about Horizon Chase.
All right, let's talk about Horizon Chase. So, Horizon Chase Turbo. This has been out for a while now at this point, but they released a packaged version a while back. So I picked this up recently, and I think you picked it up quite recently as well, didn't you?
Yeah.
So we've both been playing this, and oh yes, please. Yes,
it's everything. Please. It's everything.
So, Horizon Chase Turbo, if you're not familiar, this is a game by a Brazilian developer paying specific homage to a Super NES game called Top Gear that was developed by, I think we talked about this in the Vanishing Point Racers episode, but yeah, so this was developed by Gremlin Graphics here in the UK and published by Kemco. And it subsequently became massive in Brazil for some reason. Like, Brazilian gamers absolutely fucking love Top Gear. And the developers of Horizon Chase Turbo loved Top Gear to such an extent that they, one, made effectively a sequel, and two, brought on board the original composer to score it.
Yes, this is integral. This is super important, because the music in Top Gear is amazing.
Yes. Yeah, so the music of the original Top Gear was excellent. Top Gear was sort of almost an unlicensed, unofficial port of the Lotus Turbo Challenge series from Amiga and Atari ST, which is where all this started. And the composer Barry Leach, he ported over a lot of the music to the Super NES sound chip as well. So it's a lot of the same tunes from the original Lotus games are in Top Gear, but sort of fully orchestrated and nicely arranged and that sort of thing. And what he's done with the Horizon Chase Turbo soundtrack is he's sort of paid homage to Top Gear. So there are several tracks in Horizon Chase Turbo that adapt various tunes and chord sequences and so on from the original Top Gear music, often quite subtly in some cases. There is one track that is specifically a straight port of the Super NES soundtrack, and I practically shat my pants when it first came on, because I was like, he put that tune in. But there's other ones that you'll just be playing, and then you'll just hear a little riff in the background, and you're like, oh yeah, I remember that one as well. So he's done a wonderful job on the soundtrack of paying homage to this old game. And yeah, the whole thing feels just like the old Top Gear. So Top Gear was a Vanishing Point racer So we've previously defined that as sort of distinguished from 3D racers in that rather than actually sort of turning around corners, you're just sliding from side to side on the road, basically. And what a corner does is it forces you towards the outside of the road, so you have to steer around the corner to make sure you don't come off the road. So it's quite a different sort of feel to a what we now know as a more conventional 3D racer, what sort of your average racing game is these days. So it's a very different feel, but it allows the experience to be much faster. It allows it to be sort of very focused on sort of intricate dodging of obstacles and that sort of thing. And yeah, so the feel of this game has really nailed that sort of thing. It's got the high speed of Top Gear, but running at sort of a much higher resolution and higher frame rates. Lots of things to avoid. A hugely varied array of courses here. There's something like 108 courses in the game, plus a bunch that they've added through DLC as well. They take place all across the world. They have different weather conditions, different background scenery, different music. And yeah, it's great. So tell me about your reactions to this then, Chris.
I just scream at it. Not like in pure joy. Like when like Kermit the Frog just goes ah, and like throws his hands up. Like, this game is such an exercise of like pure unadulterated joy. It's just hard to even really describe. Like, you know, we've talked about it many times when we discuss things like Freedom Planet and stuff. But it's when you play a game that was made just totally as an act of love.
Yeah.
To celebrate something, to pay homage to something. You can feel the dedication of the developers just like pour through their understanding of what made these previous games so special. It's a celebration. It's a tweak and a modernization of those classic racers, and just to play it is an exercise of joy because this game only wants you to be challenging yourself and having fun.
Yeah,
like, you know, there's no gear shifting. There's just gas, brake, turbo. You
don't even need to use the brake, do you? You just need to let go of the accelerator. And
yeah.
That is classic Vanishing Point racer. It's like you have a brake, but yeah, you don't need to use that. Brakes are for pussies.
Yeah, it's only really useful if you're about to like ram some guy in the butt. Like you can brake, because it's probably will delay you less to brake for a split second than it will be to actually collide with someone. But like, even collisions aren't aren't terribly bad. But I can play it. It's simple. I don't normally understand racing games, but this is just so fun and arcadey, and the tracks are short, and it's just constantly throwing new things at you. New tracks, new cars, new music, new vistas. It's just there's always a feeling of something new to see. And then, of course, you compound that with chasing better times, replaying tracks. It's just the kind of game that I can see myself coming back to for a long time, especially in that special, like, I've got a half hour to kill niche, which is not every game I like is a good fit for that very important spot in my gaming life. So Horizon Chase just nails it.
Yeah. What I find really interesting about Horizon Chase is that it's not trying to be sort of a straight remake of something like Top Gear, so it doesn't use any pixel art, for example. So it's not trying to recreate the sprite-based pixel art look of Top Gear. Instead, what it does is this lovely, sharp, high-res. A lot of it is untextured 3D look, and so it has these sort of low-poly objects down the side of the screen. It just keeps everything moving really quickly. But the interesting thing is, if you look very carefully, what they've done is something very clever, which is rather than sort of handling it in completely true polygonal 3D, what they've done is they even have the objects sort of scaling out the background in that slightly wonky way that if you think of like old SaGa Superscaler games did, where sort of the 3D just didn't look quite right. So, like, when stuff was appearing over the horizon, it would sort of appear a little bit too quickly to look completely realistic. But they've absolutely nailed that look in Horizon Chase with polygonal objects, and it's just such a nice little touch that makes it feel so authentic to these old games while not being a straight remake of them using pixel art. They've really done a remarkably observant job of paying homage to these older games. Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, what the graphics in this game look like. The best way I can describe the graphics in this game to somebody who hasn't seen it is like, remember in like the late 80s when they would like make a movie and like video games would be like part of the movie's plot, and then they would use like bad 80s CG with like low poly like objects, and they would like go into the virtual world, and like that's what this game looks like.
Yeah,
a tree is just like a triangular prism with 4 sides that's been like stretched. Like, it's so great.
Yeah, it's fantastic. But again, they've sort of taken the approach of these old games of like tracks are distinguished by things like their color scheme and the specific objects down the side of the road and so on, and just changes as simple as that can make a track feel completely different to the other ones that you do, and it's just a real great example of less is more in terms of game design. It's like you say, it's really simple to play, it's really simple in structure, but it's just so fun and satisfying. And the fact you can play it for like 10 minutes or you can play it for several hours, as I did last weekend, fantastic, absolutely fantastic.
Have you played the Easter Island track where you're just flanked by Moai heads on the goal sides?
Yes.
Oh yeah, and the music, and like part of the thing is like, I just don't want to put the game down because I just want to keep hearing the music.
Yeah. It's a fantastic soundtrack, which is it's sort of, it uses sort of modern mixing and instrumentation, but the actual sort of specific way it's composed is very authentic to those older tracks that Barry Leach did. In fact, at one point I was playing the game and I thought, this sounds a little bit similar to an old PC flight simulator I used to enjoy called TFX. There was like a specific sort of synthesized electric guitar sound that was kind of wailing away in the background, and I thought, I recognise that sound. I wonder if... And then I looked up the TFX soundtrack on YouTube, and it was composed by Barry Leach. So I was like, yeah, okay,
all right,
that makes sense.
All right, all hands on deck. Barry Leach's Bandcamp. Digital version of the soundtrack $5 or full physical compact disc for $15. We can own this in our lives.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's also available on Google Play Music as well for streaming, and there's a remix album as well, which features both Horizon Chase Turbo and Top Gear tracks with like live guitar playing over the top of it and orchestrated stuff. So that's a really good listen as well.
Oh dear.
So yeah, that's been accompanying my drive to work for the last week.
I love listening to old Vanishing Point Racer soundtracks when I drive. Probably not a great idea, but I have like a Chris's driving mix like on my iTunes, on my iPod, and it's like all like old Horizon Chaser soundtracks, like music from Outrun, music from the original Saturn version of Daytona USA.
Fantastic.
A little bit of Ridge Racer Type 4. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. It's good driving music. I mean, you'd expect that really, wouldn't you? But yeah. So this is really good. Just like the way he's composed it though is very authentic to how he would have done it back in sort of the 16-bit days as well. So there's lots of sort of, to get musically technical on you, there's lots of things like sort of arpeggios and that sort of thing, and sort of intertwining musical lines and so on. And it sounds authentically retro. It's kind of hard to pin down exactly why, but it has been composed recently, but it sounds like it was composed back in sort of the mid-90s as well, and that's one of the things that's so good about it. Oh, but yeah, such a great game. I'm so glad I picked that up, because it's a wonderful part of my collection now that I will be playing a great deal for a long time. All right, so let's move on to the other thing today, which is Pokemon.
Yeah.
So we're talking about Pokemon now rather than in the third segment, because as usual when we're talking about a subject that has kind of an obvious frame of reference, we kind of want to look at the kind of lesser appreciated or the overlooked side of those things. But we have both been playing Pokemon right now, so we did want to talk about it. So we'll start now. So Pokemon Sword and Shield. First thoughts, please.
It's delightful. I think one of the things that surprised me so much so far was, after all the controversy about the lack of national decks or whatever, I don't think I was prepared for how big the Galar decks would be.
Yeah, yeah.
Literally every new area I'm going in, I'm catching 5 to 10 new Pokemon that I didn't have before. Like I think part of me, when I heard there wasn't going to be a national dex, thought it would be like the classic Pokemon way of like, okay, this dex is going to have 150 to 200 Pokemon. But it's clearly not. It's massive how many Pokemon are in this game.
I think it's 400.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's 400. So it's doable, but it's a fair bit of work to get there. And as you say, every new area you go to, you'll be seeing new stuff, which is great. And often a lot of new stuff that you haven't seen before in the series as well. There's like a few sort of familiar faces here and there, but then a lot of new stuff as well. So it's always a nice surprise. Even if you're a long-standing Pokemon veteran, you'll come across these new Pokemon that no one has seen before. And it's great. And then, of course, you've got the Galar forms of them as well, of sort of classic ones. And,
oh my god, Galar Ponyta. I love Galar Ponyta so much.
But yeah, I've been really enjoying this. As we've spoken about, I think a couple of times before on this podcast, I've sort of played Pokemon a few times in the past, but I've never been sort of a super fan of it for various reasons. I really enjoyed Moon, which I know is one that sort of a lot of Pokemon veterans didn't enjoy quite so much because of the things that made it more accessible to newcomers. But this game seems to strike a really good balance between these two potential audiences. So for people who are new to the series, you have the option of them explaining a lot of things as you go along, but also if you already know all those things, there's pretty much always an option to say, yeah, I know all this, let's just move on.
Yeah. And when you demonstrate things, you're like, oh, you already understand type matchups. Like and like, yeah, that's right, I know water beats fire, get out of my face, Hop.
Yeah, so I mean, there's so much to like about this game, and as a Brit, I'm seriously impressed by how well they have kind of adapted a very idealized look at Britain. I mean, I wrote about this recently on MoeGamer. I did a whole feature comparing Pokemon locations to real life locations that I'm familiar with in the UK, and yeah, while they're not direct, complete analogues, they capture the atmosphere just absolutely perfectly in so many different ways. So right from the beginning, where you're sort of in a tiny little village that's made up of sort of old farmhouses that have been modernized inside and so on, up until like the final city which you reach, which is basically London. They've just done such a good job on the locales and the atmosphere of these different locales and the people who are there and the sights you can see and that sort of thing. So it's a real pleasure to explore, but it's a real pleasure to play as well. So there's a lot of exploring to do, there's a lot of battling to do. I feel like, although Pokemon's basic battle mechanics haven't really changed a lot over the years, I feel that Sword and Shields, they've just sort of refined it really nicely, so it's very understandable. You've always got access to all the information you need to make good decisions.
Yeah, that's the best part. That was an addition that I think Sun and Moon were the first to do that. Actually, like, straight up put the type matchups on your your like, move list. Like, this will be effective. The other thing that I love about the modern Pokemon games is, I mean, obviously this is just probably something they always wanted to do but couldn't because of constraints, but like, just in-depth descriptions of what every move does.
Yes.
Like, you're not an old school Pokemon guy, right? But like, there was a time many moons ago where it was like, oh, okay, your Pokemon has leveled up, and now it wants to learn Fury Swipes. All right, what do you want to learn Fury Swipes, or do you want to keep your current moveset? I'm like, what the fuck is Fury Swipes? Like, I don't know. So like, I mean, obviously, like, Sword and Shield isn't the first one to do this, but like, in modern Pokemon, having detailed, understandable descriptions of what every move does and how it affects the flow of battle to allow you to strategize and to figure out how that gets into your moveset is invaluable. And then the fact that now in every Pokemon Center, there's the dude that can help you forget moves and relearn old moves, like if you make a mistake.
Yes.
Tremendous to your ability to like build your team just the way you want.
Yeah. And like the best thing about that as well is if you capture a high level Pokemon, you can then go and talk to him and you can relearn moves that the Pokemon would have got at lower levels as well.
Yes.
So like you never miss out on a move that you would have got at a specific level. So there's no need to go and specifically catch a Pokemon of a specific level range to make sure you have a particular move, which is really nice. That's especially helpful in the post game because in the post game, once you've beaten the main story, it buffs up all the Pokemon in the wild area to level 60. So everything you catch in the wild area after you finish the main story is at least level 60, which means that otherwise you would have potentially sort of missed out on a bunch of moves. But with that feature there, you can go and relearn these old moves and really sort of get a loadout that you want.
Of course. Now, I'll forgive you, Pete, because you're new to the world of Pokemon. But if you're catching a Pokemon at level 60, you know you don't use that Pokemon, right? You know you Ditto breed it, get a level 1 of it, and then train it from level 1. So you get your get the EV values and customize your moveset. Because in terms of stats, a Pokemon raised from a low level and leveled up manually will always have higher stats than a Pokemon in the wild caught at a level. I don't know if you know that or not.
I have been reading up on this recently, and I believe that sort of the EV training has been a little bit different, so it's sort of cumulative now, I think. So even if you catch a higher level one,
it's not just about EVs. It's just about the way they stat Pokemon in the wild. So it's part of Pokemon's lore that a raised Pokemon will always be stronger than a wild Pokemon.
Yes.
So that's baked into the stats, even without EVs as part of the equation.
Yes, that's what IVs is it? I think they call that. It's sort of they have better base stats and so on. Yeah. So that's one of those systems that the game doesn't necessarily explain to you, but it's one of those ones that's it's sort of become not necessarily lore of the game itself, but not necessarily lore of the narrative setting, I should say, but lore of the game. So it's something that people have sort of been discussing and analysing and stuff for a long time, and there are ways of finding out that information. Like in Sword and Shield, I think if you beat a certain tier in the battle tower in the post game, you can actually see what your IV values are.
Oh, okay.
So you can see if a Pokemon has the best possible starting values for all those stats. And then there's various ways that you can sort of manipulate your EV values and stuff as well. So yeah, I'm familiar with this sort of thing. I haven't got too hardcore into that side of things yet, but yeah, I am familiar. Don't you worry. I've mostly been catching this stuff in the wild area to fill out my decks more than anything else, and then doing stuff like sending them out on Pokejobs and that kind of thing. But I haven't got into breeding at all yet. But that seems like a whole side of things that could occupy a lot of your time if you let it.
Yeah, well, people get way in. I'm not huge into breeding. I just Ditto breed to fill my decks out. I don't get into the whole like breeding for move sets and breeding for values and stuff, but yeah, I do breed heavily for the just to fill my decks out, because once I beat a Pokemon game, my first priority is to fill out the starters.
Yeah.
So like I go and I breed my starter immediately, get loads of level 1 starter babies and just throw them out there. Like, please give me your level 1 starter babies. Like I have to have a full starter. And like I haven't gotten far in Sword and Shield, but the fact that Leon has a Charizard means I should be able to catch Gen 1 starters at some point. Right? Mm-hmm. They're in the decks. If he's got a Charizard, they're in the decks, right? So I don't know.
I'll just say he's in there. He's in there. I'll just say that.
Yeah, fair enough.
I have one.
You have a Charmander / Charizard?
Yes, I do.
Good. Then
that's all I'll say for now.
Then I'm gonna catch you with Ditto so you can breed that fucker for me.
Yeah. So lots of things I'm really liking about this. I really like the way the gyms work in this one with the gym challenges.
Yeah, it's fun.
So those are sort of really fun sort of mini game puzzle type things. They're like a mini dungeon you have to do, and each one of them is different as well and thematically appropriate as well. So you'll never be doing exactly the same thing twice. So how far have you got so far?
I just beat the 3rd gym.
Right.
So
okay.
I just beat the 3rd gym, and then I went all the way north in the wild area and got to Hammerlock, met the 8th gym leader, and then they're like, no, now you gotta go west, and I think the ghost lady is next? I don't know.
She's Fairy, I think, yeah.
Oh, Fairy, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So I met her. She gave me her card.
Yeah. Yeah, so each gym sort of has a thematically appropriate thing in it. So like in the grass gym at the beginning, you're like herding Wooloo around and trying to avoid Yampas who will send them running off in the wrong direction. In Nessa's gym, the water one, you're sort of turning flows of water on and off to be able to navigate your way to the door you need to get to. One you won't see because it's one of the ones where there's 2 possible gyms. The gym where you'll fight Melanie in Sword. It's the rock gym, and it's one where you have to sort of work your way through kind of I guess you call it an invisible maze, but there's basically pitfalls all around the arena, and you have to work out where they are using sort of a little device that vibrates when you're getting close to them. So you have to sort of feel your way around and work out where the pitfalls are. And yeah, I love what they did with Spikemuth as well. Like, I saw some discussion of Spikemuth online, and people were like, "Oh, this town's just a straight line." But I played Spikemuth, and it's like, this is fucking Streets of Rage. What are you talking about? So what they've done with Spikemuth is it's sort of a town that's kind of dilapidated and run down, and you reach it, and like there's a big like metal shutter on it, and they're not letting people in. And you go in there, and it's all dark and neon lit, and there's this thumping soundtrack going on in the background that you think, I recognise the sound of this. And it's just like a complete homage to the first level of Streets of Rage 2 by Yuzo Koshiro.
Oh,
and you
boy.
You work your way along this town, and it's side scrolling, and you run into sort of thugs. You have fighting type Pokemon, and at one point you defeat one of them that goes, "Hey, check out our cool neon sign," and you look up and there's this neon sign on the side of a building. There's just a hand pointing to the right with the word "go" underneath it.
Oh, perfect.
And it's just, that's amazing. That's amazing. I love you.
Yeah, well, you'll have to excuse me if I'm not particularly brokenhearted about not having Gordy in my game when I can have Melanie in my game.
Indeed.
Because
I get beer,
reasons.
Yeah, I get beer though, so suck it.
Oh, and I don't. What do I get?
You would have had Alistair, who's the ghost one. That's the 3rd gym, I think.
Oh, I didn't know there were 2 gyms that were swapped out.
Yeah. There's 2 gyms where there's variation between the versions. So there's the 3rd one is Beer or Alistair, depending on which one you are, and then there's, I think it's the 6th or 7th is either Melanie or Gordy. So
I'm fond of ghost types, so I'd rather have Alistair anyway.
Yeah.
Based on the reasons I like Melanie, you can understand why I could care less about Bea.
Yeah, fantastic. Can we talk about how good the gym leader music is?
Yeah. Oh god, with the crowds chanting and stuff in the background. Yeah, unreal.
Yeah. It's like every time I fought a gym leader, I just had to turn the volume up really loud, just because it's so good. It just makes it a really significant big deal. And I mean, the game does a good job of that anyway, because like anytime you're fighting a gym leader, you're in like a big sort of football style stadium. So the whole idea of Pokemon being like a national sport, similar to how football is the national sport of the UK, the way they treat it in the Galar region is, fantastic. They absolutely nailed that with sort of crowd chants and loud, energetic music, and it responds to what you're doing. It's dynamic music, so like if you get a Pokemon defeated, then it goes all muffled for a bit. If you defeat someone, it goes all triumphant and major key and that sort of thing. It's just exactly what I want from like a major battle theme.
It's definitely the first Pokemon game that I've played where they really explore the notion of Pokemon as sport.
Yes.
Like, in a really solid way. I mean, obviously Pokemon has always been sport, but like this is the first game that's like puts a primacy on that. The idea that there's gonna be spectators, there's gonna be fans watching, like it's really cool how they've contextualized that, because every Pokemon game, besides having its own kind of regionality, also kind of has a slightly different way of contextualizing the way, like, culturally that region views Pokemon, and like the role Pokemon serve as part of that culture. Sun and Moon was very big on nature and like natural balance, and like understanding the role that Pokemon play as part of ecosystems, right? Because there weren't even gyms in Sun and Moon. There were just these ecosystem challenges where you met people who kind of like lorded over and protected specific biomes.
Yes.
And like you did a challenge with them to learn about the biome and like the way like the mountain region, like what the mountain region and the flora and fauna of the mountain region does for the world around it. Like that was how Sun and Moon went. So it was really neat to like move away from that, and then the whole new approach culturally in the Galar region is just sport, like and getting pumped about Pokemon battles and the idea of the challengers as and gym leaders as celebrity, right?
Yeah. So I mean they sort of really nail that with like the collectible card aspect, and sort of the fact that you have to dress in uniform to do a gym battle and that sort of thing as well. It's sort of a really good way of capturing sort of the British attitude to sport. I mean, that's not a side of British culture that I particularly engage with or anything, but obviously I'm sort of passively aware of that sort of thing, and they've really kind of nailed that feeling and sort of the respect that there is for people who are at the top of their game in a particular sport.
You kind of like, coming from old Pokemon, like it's, I think back to like the original, the Game Boy originals. Like you went to a gym, right? And Gym Towns was supposed to be this massive thing, right? It's like life-defining thing, like the next great step in your journey. But it was just like a, like a 2-screen long room with like a maze in it, and like there was nothing to it. But like gyms or stadiums in Galar. It's just this notion that you're being watched by hundreds of people, and like you talk to people when you're making your way to the stadium, and they're like, "Oh, I'm really excited to watch you take on the champ." Like you are a celebrity because you're a challenger and you're making your way. Like just that whole notion that like the whole world is watching and like people are seeing what you're doing, and then also there's a lot of commentary baked into the narrative then about the nature of celebrity and the pressure of celebrity, and like how Hop feels the weight of his brother's success on top of him at all times, and like the need to live up to that. Like there's a whole lot there.
Hop is really nicely handled, actually. Like he's a really good rival. He's sort of been memed on a bit by the internet, but he's handled really well in terms of like the core narrative themes of what's going on. He's a really good character that explores the, like you say, the pressure of celebrity, the sort of inferiority complex when you have a sibling who's sort of better at stuff than you, and sort of wanting to better yourself, but sort of being obstructed by things. Like I felt quite bad every time I beat Hop, because every time he shows up and he's like, "I'm going to beat you this time. I've thought of a new strategy. I've got a new lineup of teams," and then I just obliterate him.
Yeah, you've got four. You've got 4 Pokemon. This will be over in 4 moves. Get out of my face.
Yeah, I just felt really bad every time, because you just know that every time you beat him, although he's like, "Yeah, you're my best friend, you're my greatest rival," and that sort of thing, you just know that every time you beat him, he's like, "Ah, shit."
Well, like when like, because I'm at the point in the story where he gets trounced by what's his name for the first time.
Yeah,
and it like devastates him.
Yeah.
Well, how do I even pronounce that guy's name? I don't even know.
Oh, it's Bede, I think, isn't it?
Is it Bede? Okay.
Yeah.
Boy, he's the worst, eh?
Oh yeah.
I don't know if he gets better. The only problem I have with Sword and Shield so far, and I'm sure it gets better, because I only just beat the 3rd gym, but like I don't really feel like the narrative is going anywhere in terms of like stakes. Like in like I don't feel at the point I'm at now where like that like Team Yell is like a bad guy with anything to say. Like like originally. Like, like I think back to like Black and White with like Team Galactic or whatever, and like we want to take Pokemon away from people. Like they were a bad guy with a goal, and it was scary, and you were fighting them pretty much right away. Like they were a threat, and it's like, so I still can't get a feel for where this story is going in terms of the RPG part of the Pokemon experience. But I'm sure it's going somewhere because of all like the following what's her name around and like learning the history of the Darkest Day and all that stuff. But
yeah.
But it's taking long.
It's actually quite interesting. It's actually quite interesting, that side of things. It kind of doesn't really reveal the stakes until quite late in the game. I'll just leave it at that for now. But it doesn't really reveal what the actual stakes are until quite late in the game. And there's a few sort of surprises along the way.
I mean, I don't trust Rose as far as I can throw him.
Yeah, well, and I mean, Oleana. I'm sure you like Oleana for various reasons, but I'm sure you can also.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure you get a vibe from her. Let's just put it that way.
The vibe I get from her is a very big part of why I like her. But yeah, no, I can kind of piece together where things are going, but. And I feel like Bede's probably a pawn, and his life's gonna get wrecked when he realizes he's been a dick for so long for bad reasons. And like I'm starting to piece it together, but it's taking slower to get where I want it to be. Like
yeah. So the focus on the early game is very much on sort of the personal story of your journey and Hop's journey and that sort of thing, and Sonia's sort of doing stuff in the background, and then that all sort of comes to a head towards the end of the game. So it does happen. It just sort of happens a bit later than it does in some of the previous games.
Yeah.
So look forward to that.
I shall.
And then there's a whole post game story as well, which is very strange so far.
Oh, cool. Oh, look forward to that.
Yeah, so I'm probably about halfway through that at the minute. So working my way through that. That's the thing that sort of takes you up to capturing the legendary for your version. So
you don't get the legendary before the gym? I mean before the champion challenge?
I'm not going to tell you.
Okay,
because that's part of the interesting stuff that happens towards the end.
Okay,
so
I'll stop trying.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I just don't want to spoil you on it. So yeah, look forward to that. But yeah, there is sort of a post-game story to follow, and then there's the battle tower, and then there's all things like the max raid battles and capturing stuff in the wild area and filling out your Pokédex and stuff. So there's a lot to do. I'm at about, I think, 45 hours so far, and there's still lots for me to do.
Mm-hmm.
So people who are complaining, you can beat this in 8 hours. It's like, yes, you can probably speed run it in 8 hours, but.
Ooh, fuck off. I'm at like 14 hours, and I just beat the third gym.
Yeah,
but I like to take my time and catch Pokemon and train new teams for each gym. So like I'm not like I luxuriate in a Pokemon game.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I want to live in this world. Like
exactly.
I'm not rushing, you know.
Yeah. Exactly, same. And it really pays to take your time as well. So like if you engage with stuff like the camping mechanics and the curry making and that sort of thing, that provides you with benefits because it allows you to sort of do things like build up your friendship with your Pokemon and so on. And then the friendship system has mechanical benefits in battle as well. So like if you're close friends with a Pokemon, then it means that sometimes they'll be able to take one-hit KO moves, and sometimes they'll dodge attacks that they wouldn't have normally dodged, or sometimes they'll resist status effects and that sort of thing. So the more time you put into it and the more you engage with the various systems, the more you'll get out of it. So yes, I mean, you probably can speedrun the whole thing in about 8 to 10 hours or so, but why would you want to? Why would you want to? There's so much to explore and enjoy along the way that, yeah, you should revel in it and explore it and luxuriate in it.
What kind of goober doesn't know that Pokemon doesn't start until you've rolled credits? Like everything else is just a barrier to end game in Pokemon.
Yeah.
Like that's like collecting, training, building new teams, exploring the world, like at your leisure, like when everything's open. Like that's Pokemon.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I really appreciate some of the stuff they put in there that makes it a lot easier to build a new team if you need to. And that's particularly helpful as you work your way through the main story. So like you'll get to a point where you know like the next gym is going to be like water or rock or whatever, and you think, right, okay, so I'm going to need some Pokemon that will be able to exploit that weakness, and I don't have any at the minute. So what you can do is you can go and catch some from somewhere, and then you can make use of like the max raid battle system, which always awards you with experience candies, which allows you to get new Pokemon up to speed very quickly. Obviously, as you say, that doesn't sort of optimize them for sort of competitive or endgame play or anything like that, but it gets them up to more than strong enough to be able to take on the various gym challenges. So yeah, if you don't engage with that side of things, yeah, you can sort of work your way through and grind, or you can catch Pokemon of the right level straight away and that sort of thing. But yeah, there's lots of different ways to approach the game and its progression, and lots of interesting decisions to make along the way, and I'm really enjoying it.
I'm glad. I mean, I remember, I always remember when we first started kind of being friends, and I was always just kind of amazed by how blasé you were towards Pokemon. So it's really cool to me to watch you finally start to understand what it means to be like a fan and really enjoy these games.
Yeah. I find myself wondering how much of that is due to it being on a console rather than a handheld.
Yeah, but you enjoyed Sun and Moon.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to say why I bounced off the old ones. I think because I've played several over the years. I mean, I played Red when it first came out, but I think part of the problem with playing Red when it came out is I played it just after I played Final Fantasy VII.
Oh, sure.
So I was like just getting into RPGs at the time, and I played Final Fantasy VII and was blown away by it. And then I played Red, and I was like, this feels a bit primitive. I mean, I know it's not now in retrospect and so on, but it's like I was 15, 16 at the time or something like that. So I was dumb and stupid and a graphics whore. But
to be fair, Gen 1 and Gen 2 didn't really have much to offer in terms of also being like an RPG.
Yeah.
It was really Gen 3 where they started being like, oh, you know what? Let's also really dig in deep in story and world building on this stuff, and so like, I wouldn't even recommend you play you knowing what I know about what you like. I wouldn't even recommend you play Gen 1 and Gen 2. Mm-hmm. I would recommend you dig in with Gen 3 and above, and don't go back to play the GBA versions of Gen 3. Play the 3DS remakes. But like you would love Diamond and Pearl.
Yes, everything I've read about Diamond and Pearl is like, yes, this sounds like an RPG I want to play.
And Black and White. You would love Black and White. So, there's a lot there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's definitely something I'll have to explore a bit more over the coming years. So, we shall see. I'm certainly having a good time with Sword and Shield right now, though. So, yeah, I'm finally here.
Doesn't matter how long you take to get there, as long as you get there.
Yeah, exactly. All right, any more you want to add on that before we move on?
No, that's it, really. Just Sword and Shield's great, and I'm loving it.
Wonderful. All right, let's take a short break then, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about some other monster collecting games that we have found interesting over the years. So, see you in a moment. Welcome back. For our third segment today, we wanted to talk about some monster collecting games. Basically, not necessarily just RPGs, but monster collecting games. And we specifically wanted to kind of avoid the big names. So we're not going to talk much about Pokemon because, well, we've already talked a lot about Pokemon in the previous segment. But we're also not going to talk much about Digimon or Yokai Watch either. We're specifically looking at stuff that isn't necessarily unknown, but stuff that doesn't necessarily get talked about quite as much as those big three. So this is not a subject I know a huge amount about. I know about a few specific games along the way, so probably the discussion is mostly going to be led by Chris in this section, because I know he's got very, very substantial notes waiting for us to work through. So, Chris, I'll hand over to you.
They're monstrous. They're monstrous. Yeah. LOL.
All right.
Right.
Where do you want to begin then?
Well, I think I just kind of wanted to talk about a little, before we kind of dig into some examples and mechanics and stuff, just kind of about what it is about this specific genre that's like so satisfying or interesting to play, like why it tends to be so addictive, why it tends to get such a great following. You are of course just learning about the magic of a good monster collecting RPG. Like, it's not been a huge part of your gamer vocabulary, as we've discussed in our previous discussions about Pokemon. So I'm really curious to hear about kind of how you feel about it coming to it later in life versus having had it always be a part of your gaming vocabulary.
Yeah.
So like kind of just a couple touch points for me is just one of the things, or a couple of the things in really standard RPGs that have always appealed to me are, I love to grind and I love to train characters and watch them grow in strength and abilities. And I love experimenting with party builds. And in a traditional RPG, your ability to do those two things is really just limited by the size of the party that the narrative has gifted you with.
Yeah.
Right? So like you're playing Final Fantasy VII, like these are your characters. You can train them, and you can build them, and you can use materia to experiment with their builds, but their builds are their builds, and the parties that are available to you are whatever combination of 3 based out of those 7 people you can cobble together to experiment with. And, you know, in a lot of RPGs, traditional, like Japanese style role-playing games specifically, what I like most is kind of reaching endgame and just exploring at my own will once everything opens up, and being able to do that training, collecting of special magics and collecting of special weapons and just maxing that party out. Like, that's really satisfying to me. Monster collecting games and monster taming games, or whatever you want to do, is essentially takes that aspect of traditional RPGs and makes it the focal point of the entire game.
Yeah.
Is this experimental party building, training, growth of your characters. And they do this by removing that barrier of a limited party gathered by narrative, governed by narrative, and they just give you these massive playgrounds of like hundreds of potential party members.
Yeah.
For you to build, train, and experiment with. So like when you combine those mechanical hooks with just my genuine love of collecting things as a hobby, and my love of monsters conceptually, and my love of art and character design, like these types of games are just this perfect storm for me to look at hundreds of different designed characters, to raise them, to build parties out of them, to experiment with playing with them. So it's such a very specific formula that taps into so many of the pleasure centers that are like central to my brain.
Yeah.
So like, are you experiencing something similar to that as you start to get into like the groove of like playing Pokemon? Is like, are you tapping into some of that? Because I know your RPG love is more in like the thematic narrative aspect of things, and like less on this like mechanical stuff I tend to focus on.
Well, that's true to an extent, but I have always enjoyed sort of grinding and getting more powerful and so on. In terms of sort of character building and that sort of thing, I always, well, previously, not so much now, but I previously sort of worried about getting things wrong and sort of making builds that didn't work and that sort of thing. And part of that was my own fault for reading things online saying, well, you shouldn't do this, you'll make a broken character. It's like, no, don't read
just
anything
do what
online.
you want to do.
Just do what you want. It's much better. So, I mean, to an extent, I've always enjoyed this side of things, but I think sort of prior to sort of really getting into Pokemon this time around with like Moon and Sword and Shield, I preferred like the party members that I was controlling to have some narrative context to them. So, like, I appreciated it when there was like a lot of customization. You could sort of tweak them to however you wanted them to work. But I kind of preferred them to be people, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
Now, having spent a bit more time with Pokemon now, I understand that in Pokemon you still have a sense of attachment to those characters. That was the thing I thought was missing from this type of RPG, kind of a sense of attachment to the characters. Like, in sort of the older Pokemon games I was playing, I was ending up sort of thinking of them very much as just collections of stats and moves. And that sort of meant I didn't really care about them. But in the more recent ones in particular, they've done a really good job of giving them a lot of personality, making them into, although they don't say anything, they've made them into characters that you appreciate having around for various reasons. And I think that's one of the reasons that I've kind of latched onto this a bit more in recent years. But I have always enjoyed sort of the mechanical satisfaction of getting experience points, leveling up and that sort of thing. And one thing that sort of strikes me as we're discussing this is there's kind of a certain connection back to almost a traditional Western RPG approach to these things. Mm-hmm. So if you think of like older dungeon crawlers, or if you think of the old D&D games and that sort of things, although they weren't about sort of collecting characters and so on, they were still about sort of building your own party as you saw fit.
Yes.
So like, I'm currently watching Pro Jared do a playthrough of Secret of the Silver Blades, which is one of the old gold box Advanced Dungeons and Dragons games, and so nearly an hour of the first part of that playthrough was him creating his characters.
Sure.
And so making sure that they had the right stats he wanted, making sure that they had the right abilities, the right equipment, and even that they looked right. And so I think there's sort of a certain element in common with that here. Only rather than sort of creating a character and then sticking with it for 20, 30, 40 hours, in monster collecting RPGs, you are sort of you have a lot more flexibility to kind of change things up as you go through, and you can still get attached to these characters, but it's kind of a different focus and less permanent in some ways, but you still got that emotional engagement there. It's kind of hard to explain, but yeah, sure. I certainly appreciate it a lot more now than I did back in the day.
Good. Yeah, and I think that the transition to 3D specifically for Pokemon was huge for that, because although I obviously respect the hell out of the sprite work in the old 2D ones, the amount of animation that the amount of personality that the animation in the 3D models allowed them to have from Generation X forward really was just a game changer in terms of your ability to make you feel attached to those characters.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know about you, but like when I'm playing and I am inching up on the next gym, and it's like, oh, this is a plant gym. Your water guys are no longer useful. I feel genuinely bad when I got to stow them back in the box and rejigger my party because like this was this was a companion that I spent a lot of time training, and now I want to. And he got me through the last big challenge, but like now you're useless. Like, get out of here. Like, it's tough, especially with the camping mechanic in Sword and Shield is heartbreaking, right? They just like want to run up to you and play with you, and I'm just like, oh my babies! Like I get so I get so excited. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, and I think that the modern tech has really brought that home in a huge way. So let's dig into some games. Kind of in the same vein as like Pokemon and Yokai Watch and Digimon, like I don't want to spend a whole hell of a lot of time on the Megami Tensei games because I do feel like they probably merit their own episode. Or at least Persona maybe merits its own episode for sure.
Yeah.
But you literally cannot talk about monster collecting games without talking about Megami Tensei. Because it is one of the progenitors of this entire genre.
Yeah.
The original Megami Tensei for the Famicom came out in 1990. And in that game, you could recruit and train monsters. Pokemon did not debut in Japan for the Game Boy until 1996.
Yeah.
So, really, Megami Tensei is one of... There may be earlier games out there that did this, but Megami Tensei is probably the earliest famous example that I can find that allows you to play a game this way.
Yeah.
So, since 1990, we're now in 2020, so this series... Coming up on 2020, so this series is 30 years old. Which I don't think a lot of people realize, because we didn't start getting Mega 10 games until Super Famicom, doing all kinds of experimental stuff with monster collection and genre play. So that's really important to contextualize. It's definitely, you wouldn't have this genre if it wasn't for the experimental stuff the Megami Tensei on Famicom and later Shin Megami Tensei on the Super Famicom were doing as early as the early 90s. So monster collecting, training, and eventually fusing were always like the core of this series. And then what they had done, especially starting in the Super Nintendo era, was really start using kind of the Mega 10 brand as a way to explore other types of genres and games while always keeping the collection and training of monsters as a core part of the series. So like that was the unifying thread that allowed them to explore all kinds of different things. So like the original Megami Tensei and Shin Megami Tensei games are just very traditional RPGs, very in like kind of the Dragon Quest mold, just very traditional turn-based affairs. But then, of course, we have Persona, right? And that's kind of the one that's super famous. Persona is fusing dungeon crawling with visual novel and dating sim elements. And then those visual novel and dating sim elements also tie into the monster collection. But another one of the things that Persona did differently from the core Mega 10 games was that in Persona, the monsters are more equipment. You know, so in the original Shin Mega 10 games, you're one demon tamer guy, and then your party, Pokemon style, is comprised of your monsters. What Persona did was flip that script and give you human characters, mostly, as part of your party, and then the personas they have equipped govern their abilities and the spells they can do, but they're not companions, they're equipment, and they're almost treated as disposable. So that very different. It's a different within the same series, same focus on collection, training, and leveling up monsters, but the way Persona handles them is radically different than the way they're contextualized in the core games, which I don't think is something that people really think about too often. Is how that slight shift in attitude toward how the monsters are treated and handled in terms of the mechanic and narrative thread. Then there's the Devil Summoner subset, which was it's been around actually since the Saturn, but I think the ones that a lot of people remember the most are the Raido Kuzunoha series on the PS2, and those were great because they took everything you know about Shin Mega 10 and then fused that with almost like a Tales of RPG style action combat system where the monsters were controlled by AI while you're also running around attacking. So once again, same core concept, new set of mechanics in a new setting. Then the Devil Survivor series, which was very popular on the DS and 3DS, took those monsters and then said, what if we slap them in a tactical RPG? This was something that had been done on one of the games on the Super Famicom, but it's one that obviously didn't come west because none of the Mega 10 games in the Super Famicom came west. But Devil Survivor revived that concept and said, we're going to take a tactical RPG with a grid-based movement system, and then we're going to fuse that with Mega 10. So when in Devil Survivor, when two characters are next to each other on the grid and you choose to attack, it then goes into a Dragon Quest-style first-person perspective RPG battle with the monsters in your team. Then there were other, after Pokemon came out in 96, everyone kind of wanted a piece of that pie. And like a lot of the games I'll talk about today are kind of Me Too Pokemon games in a lot of ways. But Shin Megami, even though they were kind of one of the progenitors of this even before Pokemon, they jumped on that bandwagon. So there's Last Bible, which is a series that's kind of cutesy. Almost like aiming at the Dragon Quest demographic, but also had the Monster Collection. But they went on to make Devil Kids. Which is exactly what it sounds like. It's straight up SMT Pokemon. Where like everything is cutesy. There's 2 separate versions with different monsters available in each version. The whole 9 yards. It just is SMT Pokemon. So that's really cool. Those are really fun to play. There's also Strange Journey, which was very recent, and that took the Mega 10 monster collecting and slapped it on a hardcore dungeon crawler. In that Tree and Odyssey vein. So, just throughout the 30-year history of the series, it's been amazing to watch how they've taken this core concept of demon collecting and training and fused it onto all kinds of different games while keeping that same identity solid.
Yeah.
There's also the Digital Devil Saga series, which was one of the few series that didn't have collecting and taming. And
really?
Monsters were just enemies. Yeah. But the ways in which you defeated monsters, you could choose to eat them in battle, to devour them. There was a devour command. And the monsters you devoured would affect your stats in certain ways.
Okay.
So there was an element of treating the monsters as a core of building your characters up that way, but they weren't actually collected or trained and leveled up.
Okay. Yeah, my sole experience with Mega 10 to date has been Persona, so that's sort of obviously very much a specific subset of what's going on with the series as a whole. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Persona has always been quite interesting to me, like you say, because of the different blend of elements and how they all feed into each other. And sort of the way that... So they are all dependent on each other in various ways. So the dungeon crawling side of things is sort of one of the main ways that you get the monsters in the first place. And then the ones you have in your possession, they can cause you to have better progress in the social segments of the game. So like if you have the right kind of arcana for the person you're trying to talk to, then you'll get a better friendship increase for them, and then in turn the better your relationship is with that person, the more you'll be able to buff up and level up a monster when you create one through fusion and so on. So it all ties together in Persona games, and while it's easy to focus on sort of the cool social aspect of Persona, they're all very mechanically solid as well and very interesting from a progression perspective. Persona 3 was the first time I encountered that, and I encountered that a lot later than the American audience because it took so long to come out in Europe after the American release. It was it was at least a year, possibly longer than that, before we got it here. But yeah, it was something I found really, really engaging and interesting, and sort of just sort of seeing what just the kind of, I guess exploration is the right word, and sort of getting to a new part of the tower in that game and finding out what the new monsters were to offer and seeing how they got more and more obviously powerful looking and monstrous the further you went through the game and so on. So sort of like you're starting off by collecting things like pixies and so on, and by the end of the game you're getting like gigantic devil monsters and that sort of thing, and it was a really...
Dick chariots.
Yeah. I never actually saw that until much later. I didn't know Mara was a thing until much later. When someone said, have you ever seen the Dick Chariot in Persona? I was like, no, what?
There's no going back.
Yeah. I did enjoy the fact that they made a real point of bringing up Mara very early in Persona 5.
Oh, did they? I haven't played 5 yet. I'm very excited for Royale.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it made perfect thematic sense from what the story was doing at that point to bring up Mara at that point, but they brought it up early. So like I say, I don't have a ton to say about a lot of these games today, but I do want to acknowledge that sort of Persona has been probably one of my sort of defining games along the period, like a game that really sort of resonated with me. I was like, yes, this is something that I very much enjoy and I want more of. So yeah, I do want to acknowledge that side of things.
Yeah, and that feedback loop.
Yes.
Like, so was that one of your first experiences with that feedback loop of collecting the monsters and leveling them up and fusing them and trying to find that like perfect?
Yeah, and sort of seeing the little percentage gauge in the corner of your compendium going up and thinking, maybe I can make it to 50%, maybe I can make it to 75%, and so on. Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, I am really excited to finally get my mitts on 5 next year.
Yeah. Very interested to see how Scramble comes out as well, because
yes,
early impressions of that seem very, very positive so far. So it'll be interesting to see how that sort of... I guess that's probably going to be almost a return to something similar to what you were talking about with the Raido Kuzunoa stuff, in some ways.
Oh, sure, yeah. Well, I mean, I know we've talked before occasionally about, like, if I could make my dream game...
Mm-hmm.
And whenever people ask me to talk about, like, conceptually in terms of genre or gameplay mechanics, like, Chris, if you could actually program and you had millions and could have a studio and you could make your dream game, the first thing I always go to is I want a Muso-style game with monster collecting and training.
Yeah.
I want to fuse those two extremely addictive types of games together into something just full on brain dead, could play it for hours without thinking about an action.
Yeah.
Fused with monsters to collect and train.
Yep, that sounds pretty great to me.
Dragon Quest Heroes kind of did that a little bit, but the monsters were just items that you deployed for use in battle. Like, you didn't actually keep them or train them. They didn't evolve. You couldn't fuse them. They were like almost like spells you could cast. It was a little different. But yeah, like, and I've been like for years just kind of like doodling my ideas for like character designs for a game that would exist in that sphere. I love the idea of it. So yeah, that's like my dream game is a Shin Megami 10 Muso game. So like, who knows how Scramble will turn out. I don't know how much you'll actually, like, what role the monsters are playing in Scramble, if you're going to, like, collect or train them in any way. Like, they haven't really revealed any of that, but the potential's there to really, really be something special.
Yeah, definitely. All right, what's next on the list, then?
I wanted to bring up something that I think you'll be able to speak to, because I've actually never played this game, but I know you have. So kind of going on, kind of chronologically exploring kind of the history of monster tamer games as a genre. One of the things that was really important to me in putting my notes together was to find games that really, at least a couple games that predated Pokemon.
Yeah.
So we can understand that Pokemon wasn't the first to do this. It was just one of the best to do this. So 1992, Dragon Quest V on the Super Famicom was also one of the earliest games to feature a monster taming and collecting mechanic.
Yes. So I've played the DS version of this. I still haven't finished it, actually. I'm like right before the final boss and still haven't beaten it. I should do that at some point. But yeah, Dragon Quest V. I mean, a lot of people focus on the kind of the main unique selling point of that game is the sort of 3 generations and sort of finding your wife and having your kids and that sort of thing. But there's also a very significant monster collecting component to that as well. So as you progress through the game, sometimes when you beat some monsters, they'll decide that they want to join you rather than just being defeated. And in that way, you can collect a bunch of monsters to complement your party members in various ways. And there's quite a significant number of them that you can get throughout the course of the game. And it's not a case of like you can get a whole bunch of them early and then stick with them through the whole game as well. There are sort of interesting and new relevant monsters to encounter and discover and be able to train right up until the end of the game, pretty much. And the way they work in that game is they're just party members. They just work exactly the same way as your party members. So there is no distinction in Dragon Quest V between the party members that you've recruited as part of the story, and the monsters that you've recruited through combat and added to your collection. And so there's nothing stopping you. If you want to have a fight that is you, your wife, and 2 slimes, you can do that. If you want to have a party that is entirely your family, you can do that. If you want to have a party that is just you and the cutest monsters that you've acquired throughout the course of the game, you can do that as well. But it's quite nice as well, because you can also use the monsters in kind of a sort of more passive way in that game as well. So because of what I've said about my personal preferences with RPGs, about having sort of narratively relevant characters in my party, what you can do in Dragon Quest V is, because your battle party is 4 members, but sort of the squad you can take around with you at any time is, I think, 8 people, or 8 party members. You can sort of leave the monsters there in a sort of supporting role in various ways. So like you can have some monsters in kind of the back line who are acting as healers. So when you get out of battle, you can do the heal all command, and the monsters can take care of that side of things and that sort of thing. So although they're not sort of directly participating in combat, if you do that, they are still having a helpful role in the party, and that's helping you to develop a certain amount of attachment to them as well. And you can name them and that sort of thing. Naming them is a really important part of that side of thing. I was reading, when I was researching sort of the history of Pokemon and so on, like one of the most important things that they said about Pokemon is that they hoped people would give names to their monsters, because that would help them develop a sense of attachment to them. And that's absolutely something you can do in Dragon Quest as well. You can name all your monsters.
This is one of the hottest debates in all of Pokemon, you know. Whether or not it's right to name your Pokemon. One of my favorite new features of Sword and Shield is the ability to turn off them even asking me to name my Pokemon. I have never done it. I will never do it. And now Sword and Shield means it's one less thing I have to press B on.
See, I've named every Pokemon I've caught. Every single
I know
one.
I know you have, and I've done my best not to make fun of you for it. I am on team. Do not name your monsters.
No, I kind of understand the appeal to not naming them, because I mean the different breeds of Pokemon, they have a name. Elsewhere in the game, people only ever refer to Pokemon by their species names, and so it kind of makes a certain amount of sense in there. But I do also firmly believe in the whole naming things to develop a personal attachment with them, and that's applied to a lot of games over the years. So, I mean, like a common example is stuff like the XCOM series, where you name your soldiers and that, and then feel really bad when they die and that sort of thing. Yeah. And but yeah, it's a really powerful way of getting people to engage with the characters in a game, and that sort of thing. It's like sort of when you can think. It's the difference between thinking of my Golem's in my party, or thinking Charlie's in my party. And I'd much rather think of Charlie the Golem than just my Golem.
I think for me it's like always been like, in the world of Pokemon, sometimes you do come across people who name their Pokemon, but it's like they're so far and few between that I've come to think of them as like the weirdo degenerates of the Pokemon world. Like, this guy names this Pokemon.
Yeah. At the same time, can I also just say, it's always bothered me that they call Pokemon it in Pokemon. It's like, no, that's a he.
Yeah, well, they do. Yeah, they didn't always have genders, though.
Yeah.
That didn't come across. It was Gen 2 introduced genders and breeding?
Yeah, I think so.
I think, yeah, so it wasn't always a thing.
Yeah.
Can we just talk about sidebar, how I didn't know that the evolved form of the new Fox Pokemon had a mustache?
Yeah, even when female.
Even when female. So, when I saw there was an adorable Fox Pokemon, I was like, well, this is my new favorite Pokemon ever. So, I had to catch a female one because it was an adorable fox. And then it evolved and it had a mustache. And I was like, why did I spend 45 minutes running around the very first area just to get a goddamn female Nickit, and then it turned into, it had a freaking Errol Flynn mustache on it. And my Carcole is female, which I just love, having the dumpiest
I love Carcole. Carcole is so great, and when he develops into Colossal as well, is so.
Oh, I didn't know there was another form.
Yeah, he's got 3 forms.
I'm googling that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's always a standard third form rock guy. I should know that.
Yeah. No, he's like a fixture in my party at the minute. So
I always have a rock guy.
Yeah. We weren't going to talk about Pokemon.
He's awesome.
Yes.
I can't wait.
Yes, he's amazing. He looks particularly good when Dynamaxed as well, as you can probably imagine.
Is he one of the ones that has a special form when he Dynamaxes?
There is a Gigantamax version. I don't have that one, but he looks good in just standard Dynamax as well. But there is a Gigantamax form of him as well. So, yeah.
Wicked.
That's your next target, I guess.
Boy, do I love me some monster collecting.
Yeah.
This is only in monster collecting RPGs. Like this level of like excitement over these like these monsters and creatures.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Dragon Quest V, one of the earliest games to really experiment with this. Lufia 2 on the Super Nintendo, or also 1995 in Japan, so it did predate Pokemon once again by year. Didn't have a heavy collection element, but there were 7 capsule monsters that you could collect throughout the world that you could level up, train, and help evolve into different forms throughout the game. So it wasn't this kind of element of there being tons of them to collect and train, but there was like monster friends that would evolve and change. So spinning off of Dragon Quest, of course, that feature in 5 was so popular, and then Pokemon came around in 96, which led to the Dragon Quest people going, you know what, me too. And then we got Dragon Quest Monsters, which is a delight. Dragon Quest Monsters has been around for a while, 1998, almost as long as Pokemon, only 2 years after Pokemon's debut. But it's really just the perfect series for people who love Toriyama's monster designs.
Yeah.
Because you can just be friends with them and collect them and love them instead of walloping on them. Your relationship with monsters in general has always kind of been an interesting part of the Dragon Quest series. Like, I know I've mentioned this before, but there was a really interesting interview with one of the creators and designers of Dragon Quest XI, the most recent game, about the way monsters are conceptualized in the series. Because someone had asked them a question about, like, I feel bad, like, wailing on the cute monsters. Like, I don't like it. And the way that the Dragon Quest people phrased it up was like, oh, wait, you don't kill the monsters in Dragon Quest.
Yeah.
Like, you've never killed the monsters in Dragon Quest. You just, like, give them a walloping so they feel bad about what they've done and they, like, scamper off.
Yeah.
And like, hearing that come from, like, one of the creators of Dragon Quest just, like, endeared the series to me more. Just this idea that you're not killing the monsters, you're just giving them, like, a what for, and then they go away chastened. Like, I love it so much. So, like, keeping in mind that, like, friendliness with the monsters has always been a part of Dragon Quest. Dragon Quest Monsters was just kind of a natural evolution of that.
Yeah.
And it's not counting spin-offs and enhanced versions and ports. It's 9 titles in the Dragon Quest Monsters series.
Oh, really?
Like, I don't think people realize how long it's been around and how many games there are. Now, I did not play the original ones, like back on the Game Boy and stuff. But I did play the hell out of the Joker series.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the modern 3D ones, which started on the DS. Joker 1 and 2, I played so much, and I still mourn the fact that Joker 3 was never localized for the 3DS, because it looked amazing, and we never, ever got it. Much like Pokemon, the Monsters series has always kind of just traditionally been the handheld versions of Dragon Quest. So it's interesting because the new enhanced Switch report of the original one that's coming out is going to be kind of the first time without using special adapters that you'll be able to play a Dragon Quest Monsters game on a television. So that's pretty cool. Pardon me. Alright, so touched on some big stuff. Let's break out some weird stuff.
Yes.
Azure Dreams.
Okay.
Are you familiar with Azure Dreams?
Is this the is this the PS1 game with like a big tower and it's sort of a roguelike but also a dating sim?
That's the one.
That's the one. Cool. Yeah, never actually played it, but always wanted to play it. I remember seeing adverts and previews for it and really, really wanting to play it, and then it never came out over here. So
Classic. Yeah, so Azure Dreams is a really neat game. The original PS1 version came out in 97 in Japan, 98 in the States. Then there was a really like mushed up Game Boy Color version.
Yeah.
That came out in 99. This is from Konami, back when they experimented with making cool games. And as you mentioned, it essentially combines a pretty traditional Fushigi no Dungeon, mystery dungeon style roguelike with a monster collecting and training game.
Yeah.
There's also a dating sim romance element in the main town, like Harvest Moon style, which affects the game. But the big thing is here in Azure Dreams, it's a very traditional roguelike in the sense that you reset to level 1 every time you leave the tower.
Yeah.
The difference is your monsters don't.
Ah, okay.
So, like, you're kind of useless. Like, you are relying on your monsters, who are the only consistent thread of growing power for you. So it's a unique twist on that mystery dungeon style game.
Yeah.
And it just has a really charming aesthetic. Just that PS1 era, like pre-rendered sprites that like bop up and down and look squishy. It's really cool. There's also like a successor to that on the DS.
Okay.
It's Tao's Adventure.
Right.
Was by some of the same people and utilized some of the same concepts, but it was clunky as shit in that charming way that like launch era DS games were.
Yeah.
Like it's not an easy one to dig in and enjoy, put it that way. But yeah, really, really like Azure Dreams, and I know this game has a pretty heavy like cult following.
Yeah.
All right, so Azure Dreams is Kartia or Kartia or however you want to pronounce that on the PS1 as well. That was 1998. I remember Kartia. I never played it myself, but I always wanted to get a copy. It always stood out to me because Yoshitaka Amano did the art for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what? It wasn't a Final Fantasy game that had Amano art on the cover, and it confused me. It confused like teenage me in a big way. But yeah, apparently that game also fuses a tactical grid-based RPG with some elements of collecting and training. The game focuses around these cards that you collect, and those cards allow you to summon phantoms into battle. Now, the cards can have different effects too. Like some of them are just spells that can be cast, some of them are equipment, but some of them are actual summons for battle companions.
Yeah.
That form your party, and then you can level those up and train them. So that's cool. There's a fusion element, just like with Shin Megami Tensei, where you can combine them to create more powerful forms. Which I always feel a little iffy about. I don't know. Like Dragon Quest Monsters has fusion elements as well, but my preference in monster collecting games, and this is something I kind of talked to you about when we were first amassing our ideas for this episode, but like there's a very clear split in monster collecting and training games between games that treat their monsters like kind of expendable resources versus games that treat the monsters like companions to be loved.
Yes.
And like my preference is definitely for the Pokemon style of like companions to be loved.
Yeah, I think that's my preference as well. That just reminds me as well with your sort of slightly feeling bad about fusion and that side of things. Persona 5 is specifically makes a point of making you feel bad about fusion. Because,
does it?
Yeah. Because, like you know, sort of the whole aesthetic of the Velvet Room in Persona 5 is like sort of jail.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when you fuse monsters, you execute them. Quite graphically.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, I was not aware of that. I always feel bad about when games have a fusion mechanic. I always don't like it.
Yeah.
I don't like the idea of like saying goodbye to two companions just to get one that I've spent time working on. Like, it's weird to me.
Yeah. No, in Persona 5, you're like sticking them in a guillotine, and yeah, it's not very nice.
Oh, I'll look forward to that.
Yeah, please look forward to it.
Yeah. All right. Moving on to additional weird strategy RPGs with monster collecting elements. I didn't play this game a lot. I own it, but you ever played Eternal Poison on the PS2?
No, don't think I heard of that even.
Yeah, Google it. It's so pretty.
Poison.
It was called Poison Pink was its name in Japan. It was released in 2008 for the PS2. It has a beautiful gothic style with really soft, like painterly color use.
Oh, this looks lovely. It looks kind of Shadow Heartsy.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, this is one of those games. It's like I like to whip out on people occasionally who want a really obscure game to talk about.
Yeah,
it has a really stunning gothic aesthetic. And this is a turn-based, grid-based strategy RPG with a monster collecting and training element.
Yeah.
I know that these have existed in the past because I've talked about some of the older ones, but this was actually the first game I ever played that took a tactical RPG with monster training and collecting approach. Right. So it was big for me because I'd never engaged with that before. Mm-hmm. And this was developed by Flight Plan, who kind of made a name for themselves with the Summon Night series, which is quite popular.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, Summon Night doesn't have even though its name is Summon Night, it does not have a monster training element to it. Like every main character gets a companion monster, but like you don't catch more. Yeah. Like there's like none of that. Yeah. So those are a couple examples from kind of that era.
Oh, Eternal Poison never came out over here. And
surprise.
The copy on eBay is £283.87.
Ew, is it really going for that much?
There's one on Amazon for £139.53. But yeah, the cheapest one I can see is £42.56 with no manual.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't realize it was a bit of a collector's item. I didn't think anyone knew it existed.
Yeah, it looks like it is.
Cool. Yeah, I like that game a lot.
that looks like something I would like very much as well. But sadly, it looks like I will never own a copy.
Yeah, it's just like gothic Lolitas making Baphomets beat each other up. Like it's very in tune with most of the things that are important to me in life. I want to talk about Ni no Kuni. You ever played the original Ni no Kuni?
I still haven't. No, I've owned a copy for like 5 years and still never even booted it up.
Yeah. Ni no Kuni is a good one because it's as I mentioned when we started this discussion, part of what I love about a monster collecting game with tons of different monsters is the aesthetic, right? Like, they're much. It's a way to engage with character design in a huge way, just to see the different designs and the different styles of the different creatures. So Ni no Kuni was great because what Ni no Kuni is famous for is the design elements from the Studio Ghibli style.
Yeah.
So to have a game where you have all these adorable, like whimsical monsters who are designed in this fairy tale Studio Ghibli style, very unique.
Yeah.
And holy shit, I just realized I didn't even talk about Jade Cocoon at all.
Oh yeah, I wondered if you're going to bring that up. Yeah.
Because I don't have a lot of experience with Jade Cocoon. I never owned or played the games.
I don't either. I only ever played the demo for it.
But there's at least 3 of those, I think. And they had some design input from Studio Ghibli as well. So, or at least the artists that was one of the artists that worked for Ghibli. So, like if you look up the character designs in the Jade Cocoon games, they look like Ghibli characters.
Yeah.
I forgot all about those games. They were also Pokemon style games, originally on the PS1 and later on the PS2.
Yes.
Huh. So yeah, see, the more I think about it, the more I realize that these kind of games that were out there. Anyway, so back to Ni no Kuni. Another thing that was really cool about Ni no Kuni was much like the Raido Kuzunoha SMT games I mentioned earlier. The battle system in the original Ni no Kuni had a very hectic action feel to it, where your monsters were running around and being controlled by AI.
Yeah.
Which was really neat. Whenever these games kind of step away from a stodgy turn-based mechanics system, it's a really fun way of kind of engaging with the monsters in a new way, because I like to see them running around actively and doing their thing.
Yeah,
it's really cute and fun. So when I had started thinking about Ni no Kuni, I thought about how it had almost a Tales of series kind of feel to it. Then I threaded that needle straight into Tales of Symphonia: Dawn of the New World.
Okay.
Which was the Tales Pokemon game.
Yeah.
Essentially, right? So Tales of Symphonia: Dawn of the New World was a Tales spin-off from Symphonia, which was the one on the GameCube that everyone liked a lot.
Yeah.
But this was on the Wii, and then it was eventually ported to the modern consoles as part of the HD remaster pack with the original Tales of Symphonia.
Oh, okay.
A lot of people took a dump on this game because it was just like a spin-off, and it didn't have like as interesting characters or as good a narrative, but what it did have was 200 plus monsters to collect with evolutionary scales, evolutionary pathways that you could train them, and you could take 4 of them, up to 4 in battle at a time.
Yeah.
And it was cool to see how it took the monster collecting mechanics and fused them with traditional Tales of mechanics in interesting ways. So, one of the things I always love about the Tales games is this focus on food that the Tales games always have. You can collect ingredients and cook, right? And then the food you eat affects your abilities in battle, your stats, your stat gains. So you can feed your monsters your cooking in Dawn of the New World.
Yeah.
And that affects them in the same way it does your other party members. So I thought that was really cool. And I'm willing to bet not a lot of people realize that there was a Tales of game with monster collecting.
No, I had no idea about that.
Yeah. So that's a really cool one to think about. That kind of brings me to a conclusion of some of the older stuff I wanted to talk about.
Okay.
I wanted to give a shout out to Siralim, the Siralim series. I know I had mentioned it in the previous podcast when I was enjoying Siralim 2 a while ago.
Yes.
But Siralim is a really interesting indie game series by Thylacine Games is the name of the developer. And it is at this point 3 games strong, and there's actually 3 Siralim titles. Siralim started on mobile, and then made its way to kind of the Vita, and then now the PS4. Essentially what Siralim does is it combines a very old school turn-based RPG experience, kind of like what Dragon Quest has going on, but then layers on top of that procedural generation elements. So that the actual dungeons you go into, they shuffle every time. Yeah. It's not roguelike because you don't lose stuff when you die. It's not punishing, but it is kind of ever changing and different in the sense that it's procedurally generated. Yeah. And in the final layer on top of this delicious cake is the Disgaea feeling of just infinite gameplay. Because there is a ton of monsters. Monsters actually in Siralim get treated like regular party members in the sense that you can equip weapons and armor to them.
Oh, okay, cool.
So it's not just, they're just not just the monster. You can equip them with weapons and armor. The weapons and armor also level up from use.
Yeah. Oh.
So you're just
layers.
It's just a constant stream of increasing power, experimenting with movesets, weapons, equipment, and monsters, fusions. I think the level cap is insane too. I think it goes past 99.
Yeah.
So it's just a really good, I hate to use the term time waster to describe a game because it's so pejorative, but if you want a game you can just play, ad infinitum, it's, Siralim is really good for that.
Yeah. I remember looking into it when he first talked about it and said, yes, that looks like a game that you can spend a long time with, potentially limitless.
I didn't play 1, I have 2. I didn't jump on 3 because I felt that 2 was so much game already that I didn't need another one, which is crazy. But Yeah, I barely scratched the surface of 2, so I didn't feel the need to spend the money on 3. But yeah, this is a really cool series, and if you're really into exploring indie RPGs specifically, I strongly recommend people give it a try. I had a lot of fun with it. I also just wanted to give a shout out to Monster Hunter Stories.
Yep.
Which I feel like everyone already has forgotten existed. I love Monster Hunter, and specifically because I love the monsters and the tremendous amount of design and personality that goes into creating the monsters. So when it was announced that there was going to be a cutesy spin-off that would allow me to befriend the monsters instead of murder them, I was really happy about that. So yeah, Monster Hunter Stories is a ton of fun. Really, I mean, it is very specifically a game for children. Like the combat is excessively simple. It's based off a rock paper scissors mechanic. Like there was an animated series. Like this isn't a game for like super hardcore people, but just the fact that there is a Monster Hunter game where you can be friends with the monsters is really cute to me. And you have your little ranch with stacks of hay, and you're hatching eggs, and it's fun.
Yeah. Cool.
So, I did want to ask you about Knights of Azure, because I know you're a big Gust fan.
Yeah.
And I know this is in that range.
Yeah, I was just going to say this is probably a good time to bring up Knights of Azure, because, this has definitely got a lot of what you're talking about in this. So, Knights of Azure, for those who aren't familiar, this is an action RPG. It's very sort of... I don't know if horror is quite the right word for it, but it's certainly very gothic. So it makes use of sort of a very similar sort of soundtrack to Michiru Yamane era Castlevania, so lots of electric guitars and pipe organs and that sort of thing. But sort of the main sort of mechanical twist on the usual action RPG formula is that as well as controlling your main character, you bring in 4 monsters into combat with you. Your 4 monsters are called servants. So these take on a pretty wide variety of different forms. So there's demons, there's fairies, there's puppets, there's sort of animated toys, and that sort of thing. So a big part of Knights of Azure's progression and gameplay is putting together what it calls a good deck of these servants and taking them into combat with you, because you can't change your party once you're out doing action RPG stuff in Knights of Azure. It's a game where you have a home base, which is where you do all your sort of character management and progression and stuff, and then you go out into the world for sort of up to 20 minutes at a time, and you do stuff out there, and then you come back and you get the results from all that and level up and progress and that sort of thing. So yeah, Knights of Azure is very interesting because you don't have direct control over these monsters, but you do have a sort of limited amount of control over them. So each of these servants, they do something specific when you summon them for the first time, and they also have an ability that you can tell them to use as long as they've got skill points remaining. So other than that, they will act according to sort of the AI command that you've given them. So you can give them a rampage command, which means that they just attack whatever's closest to them. You can tell them to do teamwork, which means that they attack whatever you're attacking, or you can tell them to follow you, which means they just ignore everything and just remain in formation. So the interesting thing about them is that rather than just being sort of various different types of damage, they are very much split into sort of almost like the sort of holy trinity of characters. So you've got servants that are obviously tanks, you've got servants that are obviously damage dealers, and you've got servants that are clearly healers. All of them can deal damage to a certain extent, so there's none that are sort of exclusively healers or exclusively tanks or anything like that. But it really pays to make use of them in a way that sort of complements your own play style. And very often, like you were talking about in Azure Dreams, there are situations where our niece is too fragile. Our niece is the protagonist. Our niece is too fragile to sort of wade into combat, and where it's actually a better idea to just hang back, tell all your servants to attack, and then sort of jump in there once they've sort of weakened the enemy a bit. So there's a sort of almost a slight sort of real-time strategy feel to it. A very, very lightweight real-time strategy, obviously, because you're just dealing with sort of very small groups of enemies and small groups of units that are under your control. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting kind of interlocking mechanics in that as well. because sort of the combination of servants that you choose to put in your deck also has an impact on Arnis as well in several ways. So you can give each of the servants an item of equipment, which will provide them with some sort of passive bonus which passes on to Arnis. So this could be anything from like an increase to attack to adding hit point regeneration or skill point regeneration, or that sort of thing. And they also have an affinity with one of the particular demons that Arnis is able to transform into. And sort of the sum of the different types of affinity that you have in your deck determines which demon that Arnis will transform into when you charge up enough energy and hit the transform button. And so developing a deck that you want to take into combat with you is not just a case of taking the monsters you like, it's also balancing out this affinity so you can take the transformation that you want to use, and also using a decent combination of passive skills that will help you to get through the challenges ahead of you. The actual collection aspect of Knights of Azure is quite different from other monster collecting games in that you're not sort of going out and collecting these enemies from in the world. What happens is you find various items called fetishes throughout the world, and you take them back to your home base and you perform a ritual with them, which allows you to then summon the thing that is represented by the fetish, and you then sort of develop a sort of collection of them over time, and you can level them up, and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's a really interesting system that sort of really set that game apart from just a straightforward hack and slash RPG. Because there were so many different possibilities and so many different combinations of monsters that you could put into your party. And there was also a really satisfying element of discovery in that, because as they all leveled up, they all change in appearance as well, which is really cool.
I like that.
So, for example, there's like one of them is like a little sort of clockwork toy soldier. And as they level up, they sort of more of their wooden parts get replaced with sort of like precious metals and gems and that sort of thing. So by the time they reach their level cap, they're sort of made of gold and they've got precious stones in their hat and that sort of thing. And like there's fairies, and their costumes get more and more elaborate as you go through and that sort of thing. So there's a really nice sense of a sort of incentive to experiment with the different types just to see how they look when you level them to various degrees. And you can also chat with them in your home base as well. So the monsters that you collected, there's sort of a random collection of them just sort of standing around in this hotel lobby that's your home base. So there's this wonderfully bizarre sight of sort of like you come back home to a hotel and there's a giant hairy spider standing just inside the entrance, and you can just wander over to it and have a quick chat with it and that sort of thing, and it's just charming. But yeah, really, really cool game, and that side of things, just like I say, really, really set that game apart from being just another hack and slash.
Yeah, I really have to give that series proper due. I haven't really explored it. I have a bit of a distaste for games with like time controlled elements. So I kind of didn't really sit well with me the first time I played it. But I just find the aesthetic of it so pleasing.
Oh, it's a beautiful game.
And the combat's so fun. Like, I've really got to check it out again.
Yeah, it's worth noting that at no point in my playthrough did that time limit ever become an issue. So it's just there, and it's just to stop you from like grinding too much, I guess. With the structure of it, it's kind of difficult to grind anyway. So it just doesn't really become an issue. It's just something that's there. It's nowhere near as prominent as it is in something like, say, the Atelier series or something like that.
Sure.
Yeah, I still need to play the second one of those at some point as well. I'm very curious about that. I haven't touched that at all yet, but definitely need to.
I never really heard anything about it.
No, I didn't. I didn't hear anything bad about it either. So I don't think it was like bad or anything like that. I think it was just like it just sort of passed people by. I think so, which is one of the reasons I'm keen to explore it. So
I don't even know if that one has the monsters or not.
I think it does,
because I know that one has like party members. I know that one has like other characters.
There's 3 different characters. I'm not sure they work as party members. I think they're like 3 separate playable characters, and then I think like at least one of them might have the ability to use the monsters. I think. Like I say, I haven't played it or even read up much on it, so but that's the impression I've got from the little knowledge I do have of it. So, but I'll definitely report more back on that more when I've actually given it a go for myself.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
All right, good stuff. All right, we've been going for nearly an hour. Is there anything else you want to mention before we wrap up?
No, I think that's kind of a good broad picture.
Yeah.
We've covered some famous stuff. We've covered a little bit of history. We've talked about a few obscure titles.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm comfortable with the journey we've gone on.
Cool. And we've also highlighted some series that we might want to return to and do more specific episodes on as well. So,
Yes.
like Pokemon, definitely one. Megaten, one. Not related, but SaGa we mentioned earlier. And I'm sure there's stuff to talk about with like Digimon and Yokai Watch as well. I have zero experience with either of those at the minute. So
I'd love to do a broad overview level 5 episode. Just talking about kind of like their PS2 era and their more heavily marketable era that they're in now, and just kind of their contributions.
Yeah, sounds good to me. All right, let's wrap up there for today then. So, as always, would you like to tell people where to find you online?
Absolutely. You can reach me at mrgilderpixels.com. I'm also available on Twitter and Instagram. Screen name Mr. Gilder Pixels.
Mm-hmm. And you can find me on MoeGamer.net, writing most days of the week. And you can find me on YouTube, which is where you may be watching this podcast right now. If you're not, go to youtube.com/ what is it? EJPierre. EJAYPIERRE. That is an old username that I've had for about 10 years now, and you can't change it easily on YouTube, so I'm stuck with it. Anyway, if you're listening on SoundCloud, be sure to check it out on YouTube. If you want an audio-only version of this podcast, you can subscribe on soundcloud.com/MoeGamer. And I think that's about everything. So, as always, thank you very much for watching and or listening, and we'll see you again next time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please help out the channel by leaving a like or a comment and subscribing. Be sure to check out MoeGamer.net for new articles on Japanese and Japanese-inspired video games, new and old, every weekday. Every month, MoeGamer features an in-depth exploration of an individual game or series as its cover game, so be sure to check the archives to see if your favourite has had a deep dive yet. If you'd like to support the site directly, please consider becoming a patron or buying me a coffee. You can find links to do both down in the video description. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.